on our own, creating scalable, market differentiating service offerings, which actually enable all our customers to maximize the Medidata platform globally. And when we are talking about customers, we mean major enterprise customers like the Amgens, the AstraZenecas of the world, the BMS, then mid-size partners and mid-size companies like the Modernas of the world, and then partners, the EMEA, etc.
Okay, let's talk clinical trials more specifically. So how is Medidata improving clinical trials, and how do you differentiate yourself and Medidata from other types of companies that are in a clinical trial space?
That's a very good question. Thank you for asking this. I feel that Medidata is playing a very important role in improving clinical trials, because what we do is we leverage technology to make the clinical trial process more efficient, more effective, and patient-centric. So where we focus is we try to streamline the clinical trial processes, and we do that by providing a centralized platform where we can manage the data from different modalities, we track patient enrollment, and we monitor study progress. We also enable remote monitoring solutions, which means we allow clinical trial staff to be able to monitor patient data and study progress, and that is remotely, so that we can reduce the need for in-person visits and make clinical trials more accessible to patients. The other one that we strive actually at Medidata is improve data quality. We work on providing remote tools for data collection, data engineering, cleaning, analysis, where we can help improve the quality and accuracy of clinical trial data. This means lineage, integrity, profiling, common database models, etc. We also work on enhancing patient engagement. We have patient-facing solutions that enable patients to participate in clinical trials more easily with user-friendly interfaces and remote monitoring tools, as we discussed. And the last that is a very big for Medidata is support regulatory compliance. Because we need to help our clinical trial sponsors to comply with all the regulatory requirements by providing audit trails, data security measures, etc.
So another follow-up question on the clinical trial space. What do you see some of the challenges and opportunities as we bring more technology into the clinical trial space as we move forward in the future, sort of where clinical trials are going?
That's a very good question. The clinical trial space actually faces several challenges, but there are also many opportunities in order to improve the clinical trial process and make it more patient-centric, efficient, and effective. I think some of the challenges that the industry is facing is always patient recruitment and retention, especially in the area of orphan diseases. One of the biggest challenges in clinical trials is find and retain participants, and we know the costs associated with it. We need to recruit the right patients and keep them engaged throughout the trial. Some of the solutions we have within Medidata, we talk about Acorn AI, where we have the capability for orphan diseases to identify sites that they can recruit patients. And we also have what we call synthetic controls. So we enable our sponsors not to have different treatment groups for placebos, but concentrate on finding the right patients. Then there is also the challenge of data quality and integrity, because we know now that the data are acquired from different modalities. We talk a lot about all these AI technologies. One of the important aspects is how do we ensure quality and integrity on clinical trials so that our customers can obtain regulatory approval, and of course ensure patient safety. Because the complexity of the data and the collection of the data comes from multiple sources. The other is cost and time constraints. Clinical trials can be very expensive and time consuming, and there is a lot of competition now. Many studies are failing to meet the enrollment targets or timelines. So reducing the cost and time required for clinical trials is a key priority. And as I mentioned, regulatory compliance, because clinical trials are subject to strict regulatory requirements and standards. Now, in terms of the opportunities in the space, based on what we discuss as challenges, it is the use of digital and decentralized trial technologies, which is an opportunity actually to improve the efficiency and accessibility of clinical trials, talking about removing bias and providing diversity. We provide the trials to the patients through telehealth, through ePro-ECOA questionnaires, through e-consent, and all of that. Also, real-world data, the collection of electronic health records, data that are coming, objective data, as we call them, coming from medically validated devices and other sources. They can provide real valuable insights into patient outcomes, and we can help optimize clinical trial design. We can also work to try to develop proxies for predicting outcomes and progression of diseases. And that helps us a lot with artificial intelligence and machine learning for automating data analysis, remote reconciliation tools that allow us to predict patient outcomes and also provide outliers and reconciliation issues ahead of the time, so we can allow our sponsor to be able to do the lock, the database lock, without protocol deviations on time and submit to the FDA. And the last opportunity is collaboration and partnerships within the clinical trial ecosystem, which means research, industry, patients, and regulators.
Okay. We have time for one last question. I always, as chairman of the HITLAB, I always like to ask a HITLAB question. So one is just, what is your connection to the HITLAB? And then how do you see the HITLAB itself advancing digital health?
That's a great question. I'm very passionate actually about the work that HITLAB is doing. In the past, I collaborated with Stan Kanowski's team. We've done clinical trials together where we had several digital components, mobile apps, and we had medically validated devices analyzing the data that are coming from different sources in order to be able to create proxies. We also had a salon together with payers where we were trying to figure out the value of medically validated data that are coming in the course of clinical trials and how the payer industry looked at it. I mean, HITLAB's focus is mostly on collaboration, innovation, research, education, and advocacy. And what I like from them is they always promote collaboration, which means collaboration between all the different stakeholders, healthcare providers, researchers, industry partners, technology companies. HITLAB also develops and tests digital health technologies, which advances the research in that area, which includes mobile apps, as I mentioned, wearables, telehealth solutions. They provide education and training, and they're advocates for policy change to promote the adoption and integration of health technologies into the healthcare ecosystem. So I'm very excited to be a member of the board.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Chrysanthi. And Stan, I will turn it back over to you.
Terrific, Bill, and thank you again, Chrysanthi. Welcome to the board.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Outstanding. And I think for the ecosystem and for everybody listening, it's just incredible to look at all the good work that metadata does. And, you know, again, I think one of the things that Bill talked about was the Breakthrough Alliance. Just a reminder, the Breakthrough Alliance is a consortium of major stakeholders in the ecosystem who are sharing evidence and driving hypotheses to create better opportunities for investment and buyers all around the world. And again, it's a collaboration between New York City Economic Development Corporation and the Healthcare Innovation Technology Lab. We also have Breakthrough One. If you want to amplify your impact in global health, scan the code there on the upper left-hand side and join Breakthrough One. That's available to anybody. Anybody can join Breakthrough One. And as you can see, if you look at LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and all these different outlets, you'll see the incredible salons and cocktail hours and different events and collaborations and brainstorming sessions that folks in Breakthrough One do on a month-to-month basis. So let's go back to the agenda for today. We have a lot to cover, and our next guest is Christine Buck, who is the Chief Medical Officer from HIMSS, the Health Information Management System Society, the world's leading health information conference, and certainly an organization that's been around. I've been around for 32 years in health IT and digital health and biomedical informatics, and HIMSS has been there ever since I was first going to my conferences as a young faculty. So, Christine, great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much. And it's really great to get a promotion today. I love the idea of being a chief medical officer. I just want to share for the record, I'm a chief marketing officer, but
marketing officer. Okay,
I appreciate the promotion.
Yeah, we're always trying to amplify folks doing good work in healthcare. So tell us a little bit about HIMSS for folks that aren't familiar with the organization, and certainly your work there as the CMO.
Yeah, and first of all, thanks so much for having me today. I joined HIMSS about 3 months ago as the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer. It's a new role for the organization. HIMSS is really focused on advancing health equity for all around the world. And what has really excited me about joining and getting on board and joining forces with Hal Wolf, our CEO, and the rest of the organization is really bringing together a love of mine and a passion and my background in transformative technology brought in with a mission purpose-driven organization. So I could not be happier to be on board with the organization. And then another piece of this too is just really what my background has been is in transformative marketing and modernizing pieces of organizations that, again, touch on how we communicate, how we deliver, how we achieve great impact. And so that's what I'm about right now at HIMSS. And just to give you all a quick background for anyone on the call today, my background has been really unique. I should have be a teacher now, a professor in anthropology, using lots and lots of research and science. And I took a turn and I went to Microsoft instead of going to grad school out of college. And that just ignited a passion for change and just for learning. And I've since worked in fintech and large consulting firms, and also done a lot of brand strategy and transformation work around the world with leading organizations. So this is a new opportunity for me to make a difference, but also do what I love and take all of that past experience and bring it to HIMSS and to all of you, I hope.
It's incredible. And I think one of the nice things about HIMSS, for those who don't know about it, it is truly a global organization. And I do a lot of work in India. I'm a visiting professor at the Indian Institute of Technology in New Delhi, India. And HIMSS is just the leading health organization, healthcare technology organization in India as well. And you know, it's in Europe, Asia, Africa, Latin America, et cetera. Tell us a little bit about digital medical devices around the world and what you're seeing happen there from the standpoint of, again, an organization like HIMSS and really focusing on the digital side of medical devices.
Well, thanks so much for that question. So one of the opportunities last week was for me to really get into that. And HIMSS is a global organization. We are small though, and I just want to call this out. We need more individuals to help us carry our mission and the work, whether, again, you're developing technology, you're a CIO, you're a technologist, or you're a healthcare innovator or provider. And so one of the things that I plan on doing, working, of course, closely with Hal and others on our board, is helping us think about how we build our presence across Europe, Africa, South America. We've had a great amount of traction and ability to build who we are and what we do today in the Americas, but we need to do more. So I just wanted to call that out as just something that we're going to be really digging into, and India as well. So when it comes to wearables, though, I had a chance to really see a lot of great technology up front and personal last week at our HIMSS Global Conference, which we just hosted in Chicago. I just wanted to do a quick shout out about this. We are back. It has been incredible to see the difference and just the galvanization and the energy in the community that came together last week. The idea sharing, the thinking around not just wearable technology, but ChatGPT, many other innovations that are happening. We had over 35,000 people convene in large spaces, small spaces, one-on-one conversations happening. And one of them was around wearables and digital technology. And I think for me personally, seeing what that can mean for a patient, what it can mean for doctors and nurses and clinicians that are actually tracking the outcomes of their patients and how they administer medicine and so forth. we're seeing that just again, very, very fast pace of innovation there. What excites me the most is I think many of us, if we have aging parents, we all worry about them and we wonder, well, are they taking their insulin? Are they taking their medication? I'm excited about this just as on a personal level to see what that means for individuals in your own family or in your communities and how wearable technology can help them, manage their health more effectively without having to go to the hospital. So, which creates, again, a drag on our ecosystem, on our system. So I hope that answers your question. There's so much we could talk about there, but I know we only have a few more minutes. So
we do. Yeah, we have time for one more question and really appreciate your perspectives. They really are interesting and certainly illuminating for a lot of folks I know, and certainly myself. What are you seeing in Europe? I think that's the one question everyone seems to be asking these days, especially with all of the work that's going on with artificial intelligence and generative NLP. The European startup systems that are going on there, what's happening there and what's the future?
So I think the future is really for HIMSS is really staying focused on how we can be an essential ingredient to helping our partners, the ministers of health. We had a really great gathering last week as well with key members of the European region talking about the future of digital and what that really means, especially with all of the new actions and the investing and funding that's happening at the government level, but also again with the startups. So converging two themes here, if you will, Stan, we actually had a venture capital, a VC startup, we called it our startup park. Essentially, we had a lot of amazing conversations and one-on-one sessions around how to get funding, but also how to deliver great outcomes for startup communities in Europe. And so there was a great convening of ideas and thought, and then just partnerships being struck last week. And then that compared to when you take that over now to the government side and what organizations are trying to do around the world, we're seeing just really untapped opportunity there in terms of really supporting, sharing ideas, things that we've learned in other markets or other parts of the world that are a little bit more evolved, helping those organizations or those countries get up and running faster. So we're going to be focusing a lot. That's going to be part of really, I would say, the next 6 to 10 months for me. Big part of my agenda. How do I drive conversations? How do we build awareness and make the right connections? We are going to be going to, I'll be in Lisbon on June 4th through the 7th at our European Global Conference, where we'll be tackling a lot of these questions. So just wanted to put that out there. If anybody's going to be in Europe, come visit me.
All right. Yeah. All right. Well, definitely. We've got some folks listening who are in the Iberian Peninsula and can certainly get up to Lisbon. So do, if you can, Christine, pop in the event and when you're going to be there, and we'll see if some people can connect with you there. Thank you very much for joining us today and just providing that high level perspective on what's happening with HIMSS, not only locally, but globally. Thank you for that, Christine.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me, everyone. Bye.
So Christine Buck, again, everybody, just Chief Marketing Officer for HIMSS, a terrific organization. Look them up and get involved. Really doing a lot to help with the not just health IT, but just all over the world, medical device, smart medical devices, digital health. And so again, my name is Stan Kichnowski. For those of you who just joined, I just popped in my LinkedIn link. If you can connect with me there, if you have any questions or comments about the program today or new topics or speakers for programs in the future, we'd love to hear from you. Also, the book giveaway, the HITLAB book giveaway, something that's exclusive here at the HITLAB Symposia each month is we have our first question coming up. So everyone get to your keyboard, get ready. Remember that the first attendee who pops in the answer into the chat box wins a free book with a customized autograph and note from Sherry, who is not only Sherry is the author of the book, but she's also the editor of the book series from Rutledge. And it's just an exciting time to be authoring works in this area now in these days, which is the longest and largest bone in the body, the sternum, femur, tibia, or fibula. If you could hopefully reach back to your anatomy days in high school and college and remember that, we're looking at the answers rolling in. And we had someone right off the bat, outstanding, Martin, our BT1 member from the Nordic countries. So again, this is truly a global audience, and our first winner today has already nailed it. So anyway, congratulations to Martin, and we are very excited to have Martin there. And so again, back to the agenda for the day today, we've got Peter Micah coming up from Deloitte. Peter is a senior partner and national health tech leader with Deloitte New York metro area residents, who is if you are at a New York metro area event, you will probably, and it has something to do with digital health, you'll probably run into Peter. Peter, great to see you. How are you?
Great, Stan. I really do appreciate the opportunity today. It's a pretty exciting environment.
No, I appreciate you joining us, and very interested in hearing about your background, of course, but and your thoughts on HIMSS. We know that you were and possibly ViVE as well, about the idea of just understanding what you saw at ViVE and some of the insights there. But if you could, just to start things off, please tell the audience a little bit about your background and what you do at Deloitte.
Great. No, Stan, I do appreciate it. Really quickly, happy to be part of the Columbia family. Met a number of great people in the business school there. Have been in healthcare my entire life and life sciences, here at the firm. I've done a lot of different things. But it became pretty apparent a couple of years ago, actually before COVID, that the industry was converging in a very significant way. The consumer is becoming more important. Consolidation, cost pressure, compliance from the government on regulatory matters. We actually penned a piece called the 5 C's of healthcare. And therein, from our perspective, was born the insight around innovation and technology and healthcare being so important. COVID actually, shined a light on that in a very significant way. Funding is waned a bit. However, the demand for, and many people have heard me say this, the demand for innovation and technology still far exceeds the supply in this market. I think payers and providers are thirsty for innovation that can help deal with the big issues in healthcare, whether it's bending the cost curve, whether it's access, social determinants of health, the health equity issues that plague the system. I think all the constituents are thirsty for innovation that will help those issues.
That's really wonderful to hear, and again, super impactful as well. And I think that's one of the things that we love about the work that you're doing. Tell us a little bit about ViVE, and you were there, you attended. Again, ViVE is one of the major health meetings, health tech meetings happening in the United States every year. Obviously, ViVE and Health, two of the major ones, and Rich and his team are doing such a great job there. What did you see at ViVE this year that really struck you as novel and important for the audience to take away?
Yeah, sure. No, I think, they're wonderful ecosystems. I think what makes them increasingly interesting is the non-traditional market participants that are now part of this ecosystem, right? So, we've always seen healthcare providers and payers, be part of, industry events like this. But when you really take a step back and look around, you'll see retail health organizations, you'll see, large technology organizations, consumer companies, all evident that, the consumer and the physician are now an increasingly important part of the transition and evolution in healthcare. And, they need to be, taken seriously.
Absolutely. And that's what we're seeing, right? We're seeing this massive influx of emerging technologies, and they all are making a difference in the healthcare system. Some of them larger differences, and some of them unicorn differences. And so making sure that certainly we're understanding what they do, the value and their efficacy of their solutions. Obviously, that's what we do at HITLAB in terms of testing digital health technologies, whether it's apps or AI or digital therapeutics every day, doing dozens of these studies and just making sure that the evidence-based, hypothesis-driven work is getting out back into the ecosystem. Are you, from what you saw at ViVE, were there any particular attributes that you would want to share with us about what health systems really want to take away from this?
Yeah, no. So I actually moderated a panel. At ViVE, there were a few heads of health innovation from the provider systems and certain emerging growth companies with innovative solutions. They were part of a point of view piece that we wrote, kind of the second part in 3 series around health technology innovation trends. our perspective was that, technology-based platforms and ecosystems would continue to form in this environment. There'll always be traditional, M&A activity in the market and public exits, but those types of activities in this kind of macroeconomic environment, can be slow, can take time. They're not always accretive. There are people issues. Speed to market is critical. And so we convened a panel of providers and emerging growth companies to say, what does it take to really collaborate in this environment, create alliances, create, ecosystems that help accelerate your particular, solution in the marketplace and solve a particular issue of a plan. There were kind of 4 issues that emerged that were important to a health organization. The first was shared values. I think culture, it's just amazing how, you focus on technology and innovation and it still comes down to people, culture, and fit. That was a consistent theme amongst the participants, aligning against how they see themselves in the marketplace. The second, and this should be no surprise, was a focus on the patient experience, and not just a novel kind of me too slick technology, but solving a big issue in healthcare that focused on the patient experience, elevating that experience, creating better access, and ultimately an evolution to better value-based care outcomes was a real focus, particularly on the provider side. The third, and this was interesting, was, and it's not intuitive from traditional well-established health systems, but willing to fail and fail fast, not give up on a innovation or technology that faces off against the patient or the consumer, learn from that experience and redevelop that solution as quickly as possible. I think that was a telling sign of the healthcare ecosystem, taking some of the lessons learned from the technology marketplace in terms of how to, adopt some of these innovative technologies. And the last was just, a revolutionary thinking beyond technology. Many of the health care organizations that were part of the panel and part of the audience included things like, the patient experience, a new and innovative process, and how people interact with the healthcare ecosystem. They all viewed those as potential innovations. And it was interesting that innovation took many forms beyond just technology. I think there was an agreement that technology was an enhancer and an enabler, but that it needed to be embedded in each of those components of the healthcare experience.
Fantastic. And great job, Peter. Really appreciate your coming online today and helping us out and understand what was going on at ViVE. And again, looking forward to seeing you at an event soon in New York City. Take care.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Stan.
So again, that's Peter and Micah from Deloitte, everybody. You saw his LinkedIn dropped into the chat box, connect with him and definitely get to know him. He's a veteran of this stuff and understands. He's been through several waves of it over the last 25 years and really gets it. Don't forget, if you are a digital health startup and you want free research from HITLAB and free opportunities to connect with HITLAB ecosystem stakeholders, make sure that you sign up and enter in your tweet size entry into the HITLAB Innovators Challenge. We've got that coming up. You're going to be, if you're a finalist, to be promoted at the HITLAB Summit in Digital Health Week at Columbia University in June 27, 28, 29, at the end of June at the Morningside campus and Lerner Theater. So be sure to click on that right little scan bar, the QR code on the bottom of your slide there, and enter your company in for all kinds of in-kind services and promotions and connectivity through the HITLAB network. And next up, we have another person who went to ViVE and appropriately named Enable Health. Mark Stevens is a managing partner there and has some additional perspectives on what some of the key learnings were from ViVE this year in Nashville. Mark, thank you for joining us today.
Great. Thank you, Stan, for having me.
No, appreciate it. And if you can, tell everyone a little bit about what you picked up at ViVE and some of the key learnings and some of the key attributes that you found when you were walking around the conference this year.
Yeah, and if you will, just a little by way of background and why I was at ViVE this year. At Enable Health, we help health systems and startups innovate and be successful in the marketplace, often by bringing the two together. And as a result, we've been very active sort of in the thought leadership space. We've worked with a lot of conferences over the years, providing content and speakers. And of course, with us, health and ViVE are no exception. Last year, we reached out to Rich Scarfo, who runs health, founded by Jonathan Weiner. And Jonathan did a wonderful job in recruiting Rich away from HIMSS. And Rich is just the maestro of healthcare events. I said he's the Ken Burns of storytelling in healthcare. And he and his team, again, did a brilliant job. Health actually formed ViVE just last year. This was just the second conference of its kind, specifically to partner with Chime, the hospital CIO Association, and to, I guess, a lesser degree with the AMA and others. And really, they're focused on digital health transformation and the business of healthcare. So I think that's important to understand. It's a different conference than health. Both have grown significantly. It's doubled in size. Both have since they've started. Again, this is just ViVE's second round, and there were about 7,500 people there in total. We are formally a premier programming partner. So my perspective is, as someone who's contributed to a sponsor, not only sponsoring, but producing different parts of the conference. Our focus was on innovation, particularly in the orthopedic, or we'll call broadly the health sports tech space. We featured a Shark Tank, but we also, for a for-profit company, we're mission driven. And there was a lot of room for us at ViVE this year. Because it was the place and time that they chose to announce the creation of the Health Foundation. And that's obviously a nonprofit organization advancing various goals within healthcare. The main platform of the Health Foundation was featured in programming throughout ViVE, and that was their coined word, Tequity. So how can we leverage technology to help achieve goals around achieving health equity? And I was fortunate to put together and moderate a panel on moving beyond the moral imperative of reacting to SDOH challenges and health equity challenges, and look at the economic imperative. See, how can your organization and society and healthcare be economically successful as well as morally successful in meeting these challenges of our day?
That's great. Now, really impressive background. I mean, Rich and his team have just done a great job in bringing ViVE up to the level it's at right now, and especially during a pandemic, which was so difficult to do. And, we look at the work that they've done in helping highlight emerging technologies and really giving them a stage and a place to not just be able to highlight what they're doing and for folks that want to adopt new technologies, but also connect with investors. I mean, one of the nice things about ViVE and health is that it's a great consortium for folks to join who are startups and who are investors. And then a lot of the buyers that are out there, if you're a buyer and you're trying to find something that's going to help your health plan, or it's going to help your life science company or your public health agency, a lot of these emerging technologies, that's where their new home is going to ViVE and going to HLTH and health and being able to meet people there and connect. And love the new assembly as well, just the architecture of the floor, super interactive.
Absolutely.
Just incredible stages and wonderful flow of different opportunity for attendees to meet each other, and just like the design and very, very avant-garde and progressive. So really nice job that Rich and his team has done there with ViVE. Yeah. And again, it's another organization just for the folks who are in the New York City ecosystem that's based out of New York City. And if you are in New York City, stop by and say hi to them for sure. And what were some of the learnings that you picked up, Mark, from ViVE in Nashville last month? And what did you see there that really impressed you?
Yeah, I think, well, I'll certainly echo Peter was spot on with all of his observations. And, I'll go back again, being a programming partner. I'll echo what you said, Stan. They do just such a beautiful job presenting. One of the words that came up from the vendors and even the speakers that I spoke to was democratization of a conference. And so to your point, with obviously the content, the speakers and the caliber there are extremely important, but it is the networking opportunities. And that's not lost on Rich and his team. And a special shout out to Mary Sheridan, who's director of programs there. She's in partnerships. She's been a wonderful partner to ours, but one of the reasons why the event is successful. And, democratization means there aren't enormous booths. You're not overwhelmed. They structure it so that it's easy to go from one booth to another. So you can see a number of startups in a relatively small space. But they do curated networking too. So as you put, buyers are there, investors are there, startups are there. They do a really good job bringing all those folks together. Because what they ultimately want to do, and it's why Jonathan Weiner founded these events, is to move the industry forward. So they know these connections are key, so that we can walk away from this event and know we've moved the needle. It wasn't just a bunch of talking heads. And also, just little things, but they aren't really that little. When you're on the floor, you have access to food, and the food's included with your price, but it's there, you can eat. And actually the food was really good. And people appreciated there were drink stations that were available that didn't run out of drinks. And it's those little details that make for a great conference and a great experience. They also do a great job in curating sort of off-hour events. And so there's always great entertainment. I think when people go there, it's not inexpensive to attend, but you're gonna get your money's worth. And as far as a programming note, it shouldn't be lost on folks that it was the same time of the Covenant School shooting in Nashville. I know my phone lit up because people were concerned that we were in harm's way. I can tell you we weren't. I can tell you that the hospitality and just the wonderful nature of Nashville and its people were on full display. But Rich Scarfo made a point in his opening remarks of saying how important it is to be kind to each other and to reach out. And they did a beautiful job in real time messaging electronically to folks at the conference about the tragedy. And we had several moments of where we could exercise support by having a moment of silence. So they just did that. There was no script for that, but it showed how professional they are, how well it was handled, and I know appreciated by both Nashville and all the attendees.
No, it's fantastic. Well, thank you, Mark, very much for joining us today. I really appreciate your insights and your highlights of what took place at ViVE, and certainly what you saw happening there. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks for having me.
So again, everybody, that's Mark Stevens from Enable Health. Be sure to link in and connect with him as well. He's just, again, someone who's been around healthcare veteran, and obviously tremendous attribute to the healthcare system. Speaking of attributes in healthcare systems, Glenn Tolman's up next. For those of you who don't know Glenn, he is a rarity in digital health and health IT, health and biomedical informatics. He's someone who has not once, not twice, but now 3 times hit the unicorn side of healthcare, and had an incredible impact on the healthcare system over the last 30 years, really almost 40 years, although he looks like it's could be 20 years. Glenn, how are you? Thanks for joining us today.
I'm great, Stan. Thanks. It's great to see you. And 40 years are we really 40 years? Is that what we're saying now?
I think we're getting up there. I mean, between all scripts and the stuff you did before that, and then obviously Livongo and now Transparent, it's just incredible run that you've had. And if you could, just for the folks that aren't familiar with you, if you could just give a little bit of background about yourself, please.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So hello, everybody. My name is Glenn Tolman, and I'm currently the Chief Executive Officer of Transparent, which is the first comprehensive consumer-directed health and care platform. And what all that means is really we make it easy for people to access high-quality, affordable care. And so that's what we're focused on today. I also wear a different hat, and that is I'm a founding partner of a venture firm called 7Wire Ventures. And at 7Wire, we focus on early-stage digital health companies. And most recently, in a prior life, I was the founder and CEO of a company called Livongo, which was the first at-scale consumer digital health company to empower people with chronic conditions to live better and healthier lives. And we started with diabetes, we moved to hypertension, we then went to weight management and ended up at behavioral health. So that was our focus there. And you've already heard that before that, electronic health records and e-prescribing at Allscripts. So that's most of my career has been focused on running and investing in companies that are changing the way people receive their health and care. So that's kind of a very high, quick overview.
And again, for those in the audience, and we've got hundreds of folks from around the world now tuning in. If you don't know about Glenn, I would highly recommend you study him. Glenn and his partner Lee are from 7Wire. They are the co-founders of 7Wire Ventures, arguably the most successful digital health fund in the kind of seed A, B round areas, and incredibly understanding of the nuances of healthcare, and have done a lot of lectures for us at Columbia. Greatly appreciative of that as well, Glenn. But again, we're here to talk about HIMSS, which was in your hometown, your backyard, Chicago. Again, for those of you who don't know, Glenn and Lee and 7Wire are based out of Chicago and huge supporters of the ecosystem there and Matter and all the good work that folks are there doing. But certainly the HIMSS meeting was amazing. It was getting back to its pre-pandemic form, 35 or 40,000 folks. I heard different numbers there, and a lot for the city of Chicago. Just every hotel was loaded with HIMSS people. Every restaurant had cocktail hours. When you were walking through HIMSS, when you were looking and giving talks and whatnot, what were some of the things that you learned that you can share with our audience today?
Well, I think I'd reflect on it in two ways. One, you've already mentioned it, Stan, and that is HIMSS is really back. During the pandemic, there was a slowdown, less people. It was a bit confusing because HIMSS has been about walking the floor, seeing the innovation real time. That always was one of the big draws, which is why so many people, 35 or 40,000 people would attend. And during the pandemic, that didn't happen. I think it's really back in that respect. It's also become a leader from an idea standpoint, which was its former role. And if you think about HIMSS, think about all of the health systems, health providers, not only across America, but across the world. So a lot of innovation showing up, a lot of energy showing up, and that was really good. And then what I talked about during my keynote was really what I saw as the 5, I like to call them actionable on building health and care across the.
Okay, I think we're having some.
I have to stand.
Yep, you're coming back here. What we'll do is if you could just say something about 5 actionable topics there.
Yeah. So can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, you're coming in now.
Okay, so we'll try not to move. So what I was saying, that the HIMSS is back, number one. Number two, I think we saw this new energy both walking the floor and in the idea discussion. And this is mainly for the providers across the country, health systems, practices, new innovative ways of delivering care. And then what I talked about in my keynote were the 5, I like to call them actionable predictions of where healthcare is going and what people should be focused on. And those, just a kind of very quick high-level summary. If you want, we can dig down. But first and foremost, consumers in charge. Just like on your ride-sharing app, you're totally in charge. You decide when the car comes, what kind of car you want, who's driving it, everything about them. You can change the temperature, all of that. Well, think of healthcare in that same environment. So number one, consumers in charge. Number two, AI will inform the experience. So we're going to see AI not take over care, but make it easier for our doctors to avoid the non-clinical paperwork that is absolutely suffocating them, number one. And number two, make them smarter. So when you talk to your doctor, she or he can't necessarily tell you, oh, there's a clinical trial for that thing you mentioned to me 2 years ago. But now with the help of AI, we'll be able to do that. So number one, consumers in charge. Number two, AI will inform the experience. Number three, care in 60 seconds. We want to make sure that people using their cell phone can get access to a physician or a therapist or a nurse or other kinds of caregivers in 1 or 2 minutes, not waiting weeks, not going to the ER, but getting instant access to care. Number three. Number four, health systems have to take over the relationship with health consumers. they're being disintermediated. And if they want to be relevant, they have to take over that relationship, number one. And number two, they have to change the payment model. You know, when you go to your local Starbucks, you pay for what you get. When you go to a health system, they may wait 6 months to get paid for what they do, and they may not even get paid. And they have to change that. And last but not least, they have to get in the business of risk. And I like to say, you know, at risk is no risk at all. The real risk is the status quo. So that was a quick summary of the 5 that I talked about during my session there.
It's a great cover point too, because it really does hit the nail on the head on what's happening in the ecosystem. Really appreciate that. We've got some questions coming from the audience, and the big one right now is, you know, everyone is looking at a lot of the government, the ACA type care models that are coming out for independent contractors and freelancers and self-employed people. And we've got a question from Monica, who's wanting to understand when Transparent will be available for folks on an individual basis so they can start to access all the great programs you guys are putting together.
Well, we'd love to do it. Right now, we have our hands full. We're focused on the large and mid-sized self-insured market. After that, we're going to try to go toward Medicare or Medicaid, and then ultimately get to consumer direct. Now, we just made an acquisition of 98.6. We spent $100 million to buy that company. And 98.6 did have their front end available to consumers, but it wasn't really at scale the way we would want to do it. So love to get there as quickly as possible. And also, we'd love to make it available to individuals, because so many people are now self-employed that why should they not get the best healthcare and get it and be in charge of their care? So all I can say, and I hate to disappoint, but you know, we're trying to get there as quickly as we can.
No, appreciate it and certainly understand. And, you know, it's obviously something that you've got your hands full, integrating the acquisition and then trying to make it something that can scale into the, and certainly into the freelance and the free market place as well. One of the things that really strikes us as an ecosystem is that you and your team at 7Wire, certainly Lee Shapiro, who everyone loves as well, is you guys are constantly coming up with a really good understanding of the ecosystem and where it's going for funding. We have a lot of digital health startups who are watching the program right now. And last year around this time, Lee was on the HIMSS channel and talking about how they were going to see a lot of different funding have to come into play because the venture capital, the traditional venture markets were going to be tightened up a little bit with this softish landing that Powell talks about. And it looks like we might actually hit it with the 1% GDP number that came out this morning. But this idea of having to find capital in other places, particularly if you're in that chasm of no revenue yet and still building product and trying to get to an FDA approval, whatever it might be. What are you thinking is going to happen this year? Again, Lee had the crystal ball last year. You guys were spot on in terms of where things were going. And what's the Glenn Tillman, Lee Shapiro, 7Wire thought process for funding in 23?
Well, number one, I trust in Lee. So whatever Lee says, I always agree with. I've been doing that for more than 30 years and it's always worked for me. You know, that said, I think, look, good companies are going to get funded. And we just had one of our great companies, which is OCD, which is an OCD company focused on obsessive compulsive disorders. And you know, they did a great funding round. It was kind of a crazy round. They did the round, raised more than $30 million, put it into the bank. What bank was it? Silicon Valley Bank, sitting in the checking account, the most vulnerable place to be. Fortunately, thanks to President Biden and the administration, we did the right thing and got us over that hump, but they were at real risk after an incredible round. But good companies, and the easiest thing to do in this environment is focus on 3 things. One, how do you actually deliver an experience that people don't just like, they love? Because our healthcare market today, people say it's more complex, more confusing, more costly than ever before, and it's getting worse. So how do you create an experience with your products, your listeners today, that people love? That's number one. Number two, how do you measurably improve care? to make sure that we can show it's making people healthier. You're not just writing prescriptions to make money, you're making people healthier. Number three, and this is super important, how do you do it at a lower cost? That's what technology has always done. It's helped us deliver products at lower cost. And you got to do those three things. If you do that and your company is growing, you'll get funding. It may not be as rosy as it was a year ago or 2 years ago. That's okay, because remember, funding rounds are just to keep you alive. That's the number one thing. The responsibility of a CEO of a startup is staying alive. Funding rounds keep you alive. They're not exit rounds. That's when you want to maximize. So don't worry about if the round seems lower or higher, or dilution. Get the money, build the business, things will be okay.
It's fantastic. And in general, where are you seeing the healthcare market in the US going? And this is the last question. We got a couple minutes left. And where are you seeing digital health? What are the digital health vectors, if you will, whether it's an app or a digital therapeutic or AI? Obviously, AI is exciting. You guys, you just bought a really nice AI company. But where are you seeing the general ecosystem going? Is it still building that virtual health system for the 2030s, or is it going somewhere else?
Well, I'd say a few things. The healthcare market is out of control. It's $4 trillion, growing to $6 trillion. Estimated in the market, we'll see 6 to 8% increases this year, next year, and the year after. Compounded, that's 25%. No business can afford that. So we need solutions. We need them quickly. You're going to see a tremendous amount of innovation, and those are the companies we're investing in. Relative to digital health, I think there's pushback on so many point solutions. So people are saying, give us an integrated solution. That's a big part of what Transcarent's doing, one-stop shopping, and we'll do all the contracting, all the security, just like your iPhone. But point solutions, it's going to be tougher because people have, I think the quote was, Delta has more than 60 different point solutions to try to deliver great care to their people. And while Delta is great, they're a client, they're doing great things, great airline as well, but 60, that's a lot to manage. And that's a lot of confusion for their people. So we see a consolidation happening. Good companies will get funded. As for digital health, we'll see another year or two of digital health, and then we'll stop talking about it. We don't talk about digital banking anymore. We don't talk about digital, travel. We just talk about travel. So digital will become integrated into the entire experience. And that's what we see happening. So another year or two, we'll talk about digital health. And then you and I will just be talking about healthcare.
Looking forward to it. Glenn, thank you very much for taking time out to share all this wisdom with the audience here today, and certainly your highlights from HIMSS. Looking forward to catching up with you again soon. Again, thank you, Glenn.
Always my pleasure. Thanks, Dan.
Take care. So again, everybody, that's Glenn Tullman. He's CEO of Transcarent, and he's the managing director and founding partner at 7Wire. Highly recommended to link in, follow him, tweet, etc. He's just really someone who understands the nuances of healthcare, and especially the intersection of healthcare and technology. And so it's important, obviously, as startups, whatever we do, to get involved with that. He's also going to be at the HITLAB Innovator Summit coming up June 27th through the 29th at Columbia University. So if you want to meet him in person, definitely sign up and hit the QR code there and to attend in person. That's, again, or online. We do all of our events online as well, so they can be free for the world. But then obviously in person, costs us a little bit of money to put them into play. So we need to charge a little bit of money for those in-person events. But you're welcome to join us in New York City Digital Health Week in last June of 23, and would love to see you all there. Another person who has tremendous intersection between healthcare and technology, and then medicine as a physician, is David. David, thank you for joining us today. You've been a part of the HITLAB system and certainly the Columbia ecosystem for years. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm also a native. I live in New York now.
Great to see you in New York. Outstanding. And just give everyone a little bit of background on what you do at Microsoft as the Global Chief Medical Officer and the VP of Healthcare.
Sure. Well, a little background on myself first. Physician, health services researcher, technologist, been in health tech for the past 25 years. My role within Microsoft is to work very closely with our clients and our partners as they head down this journey of how technology can help improve operational efficiency, improve outcomes, improve experiences for both patients and clinicians. And it's really about translating that amazing technology into things that we can use every day.
That's amazing. And, again, you're living in New York City now, which is absolutely outstanding. It's great to see you in the metropolitan area. You're in where are you living exactly?
Yeah, Upper West Side. Yeah, I'm not too far from Columbia.
All right, outstanding. And looking forward to seeing you at the summit as well. But just to kick things off here, and obviously for the audience, you have any questions for David, please do pop them into the chat box. But if you could, just to kick us off into the direction of the theme, if you will, of the background, you were both at ViVE and at HIMSS. If you could give the audience a little bit of a highlights and impressions from each meeting that you found that you're really thinking about, can you talk a little bit about that for us?
Yeah, sure. So just keep in mind that ViVE occurred first. It was about a month ago, and there were many different sessions. Obviously, I couldn't attend everyone, but there were a lot of general themes. The ones that I attended, there was a significant amount of interest in understanding how technology can be used to address some of the inequities that we see in healthcare. So health equity, finding ways that we can apply artificial intelligence in an unbiased way, allowing us to be able to reach the underserved. So many great presentations and discussions on that topic. One of the topics that I also spent some time talking quite a bit about was the data itself and how can we manage and protect that data, data privacy, security. Obviously, in healthcare, this is a high priority area, and with the number of cyber attacks that are occurring every day, it's extremely important that we have a policy or a strategy around that. And there was some announcements that Microsoft made relative to that as well. And then at HIMSS, which was just a couple of weeks ago, it seems like almost a month ago as well, there was a significant number of announcements made there, but the general themes, artificial intelligence, again, big theme. But specifically large language models, a lot of the announcements came about were specific for LLMs and generative AI. And then, of course, responsible AI and the use of multimodal AI. So there's a lot of different types of things that were all AI focused. Of course, electronic health records, there was a lot of discussion around clinical workflows and also optimizing those workflows, leveraging some of the newer enhancements. So just across the board, a lot of really exciting things in both of those conferences. And it was exciting to see also good friends and colleagues that I hadn't seen in a while.
It's fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. And talk a little bit about the alliance now in certain, Microsoft and Epic are going to be combining to help bring AI into the Epic EHR. And the audience obviously saw that and would love to hear more about what you guys are doing there.
Yeah, this has really been a longstanding partnership that we've had with Epic. It was just one of those things that was perfect timing for us to be able to announce not only the elements of our partnership around how one can do Epic on Azure, so really kind of taking full advantage of the commercial cloud, but also ways that we could apply the large language models, specifically generative AI, on to existing workflows within Epic. And the use case that was the very first one that we highlighted was the one that related to the Epic In-Basket. And it was obviously something that a lot of clinicians have been looking for. And really what it does is it as the messages come in, it auto triages them and decreases the number of messages. And then for those that are actually surfaced up to the clinician, many times the clinician does have to respond back. And there's an auto generation, a note generation piece using the large language models. So you can take that note, and if you want to use it and tweak it, you can set it up. That will save you a tremendous amount of time. If you think it's maybe not quite right and you don't want to use it, no worries, you don't have to use it. But it really is this model of what we refer to as co-pilot, where we're trying to create tools and that will help the clinician, not replace the clinician. And so as they think about all the mundane and administrative tasks that they have to do in terms of looking things up, writing things, documenting, all of that could be automated. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to create the tools that will allow the clinicians to have a better experience.
That's incredible. Now, I think a lot of what we hear in the ecosystem is, physicians worrying that AI is going to take their job away and that there's not going to be a need for radiologists in 10 years because it's going to be done by folks offshore and folks using AI. What's your response to that? I mean, it seems like it's, like you said, like patients aren't ready to get anywhere near that right now and trusting AI, trusting any computer with their healthcare. What's your perspective there?
Well, I think largely the reason why this has come up is because the large language models that we're seeing are performing at a level that we've never envisioned AI to perform at. And just a classic example is when you look at the USMLE, the United States Medical Licensure Examination for clinicians. And we're not talking about medical students or residents. We're talking about physicians that are, practicing and right there in clinical practice. The questions that are on that test are really hard. They're things like an 80-year-old individual with multiple comorbidities presents with all these different crazy symptoms. And here's the lab findings, here's the physical exam findings, here's the radiology. What's the likely treatment or what's the likely diagnosis and what's the likely treatments? These are the questions that clinicians struggle with. And to be able to perform at a 90% accuracy on that is amazing. And there have even been some thoughts that even the 10% that it got wrong, it wasn't really, it was reasonable, some of the things that they were looking at. So we're looking at a technology that has incredible potential to be able to do certain things. But at the same time, there is always this concern that there will be errors and that, what we oftentimes refer to as hallucinations, where this information is presented and it was sort of made up or it wasn't really accurate. And that is a real issue with large language models. And so what we do need to think about is how to put those safeguards in. And so this is why responsible AI has become one of the big topics that we talk about. And with responsible AI, it means not only putting those safeguards in, but let's start with the high impact, low risk use cases. And the things that, when I mean high impact, think about from a clinician perspective, we're overloaded with administrative burden with so many different tasks, whether it's documenting into the EHR, whether it's answering a series of emails, and whether it's also even doing some of the work around prior authorization. That type of work can all be automated. We've got tools now that can help us. And these are the types of use cases for the technology that will be extremely valuable, but always with the human, or in this case, the clinician in the middle, reviewing that content, making sure that it's something that they feel comfortable with, and then helping them so that they can take better care of the patients.
That's incredible. What a very detailed explanation too. But certainly, in short, no one's envisioning a time where healthcare is going to be delivered by AI or by robots or anything like that. So that's good news, I think, for all the physicians that are in the audience listening to this and watching. It's clearly something that's going to be, especially if it's going to be patient-centric, it's going to have to be physician driven and delivered, and maybe assisted by AI, but that's about it, right?
Yeah, Stan, one of the things that happened just before HIMSS was Nuance made an announcement about the Dragon Ambient Experience. It's called DAX Express, and that also incorporates the large language models. And essentially what it does is it takes the conversation that a patient and a clinician have, it converts into a note, the clinician reviews it, and then it can be uploaded into the medical record. This saves the clinician a tremendous amount of time, but it also improves the patient experience. So the patient's actually talking to the clinician as opposed to talking to the clinician's back. And it is extremely helpful in terms of doing so many different things. And that's part of the reason why these tools will not only improve the overall efficiency of care, but it'll improve the quality of care, the experiences for patients, and allow us to be able to deliver better experiences for all.
That's a great way to look at it too. A lot of the audiences are coming from digital health startups. And obviously anything that they can do to work within the Microsoft ecosystem is going to help them a lot in terms of APIs and things like that. Or if there are other areas that you're seeing really nice resources for startups that are trying to understand where to connect in for APIs and things like that. Do you have any advice for startups who are trying to connect into the larger ecosystem about how they can either connect to Microsoft or others through APIs and other integrations?
Absolutely. So Stan, one of the reasons why I'm so excited to talk to you and the audience is that Microsoft is, our position is that we want to enable every company, every organization to be able to help achieve their goals. We're not here to compete. We're not here to monetize any of the data sets. Essentially, what we want to do is we want to be able to help leverage technology. And to do that, we've got a program for Microsoft called Microsoft for Startups that anyone can enroll in. Gives you free credits for Azure. You can get jump started onto different things. And it also allows you an on-ramp to be able to then get to leverage the Azure OpenAI services. And the reason why that's particularly important is because when we talk about generative AI, we don't want enterprise organizations to be all going to the internet and uploading their own files and documents to the internet to do things that would potentially be where data might get exposed or IP might get exposed to the broader public. Use it within your own secure Azure tenant. And it allows us to be able to then build and craft new types of LLM that you will essentially take ownership of as you start thinking about those experiences that you as a company or as an organization can provide to your customers. And so this is really the best way for us to start thinking about how large language models can be used by any organization, whether they're a startup, medium-sized, or large one. And what we're recognizing is that large language models, generative AI, will disrupt the healthcare industry. It will disrupt every player, and it's worthwhile for every organization to start thinking about how it can be applied within their own clinical use cases and also within their own products.
That's incredible. I mean, that's a massive piece of advice for the audience here. So again, for folks listening in to that, look that up. That's really helpful. And last question, David, we've got about 2 minutes left. What, in terms of the future of this and where it's going, this amazing ecosystem called digital health in the United States. And we just had Glenn Tolman on, who talked about how the US percent of healthcare of GDP. When we talk about a GDP of about 23 trillion in the US, and we've got a healthcare expenditure of about 4 trillion. So we're running at about 18% of GDP. The next highest country is Britain at about 11%. What are you seeing digital help us not only improve patient outcomes, but reduce costs and increase value in the healthcare system? What's the biggest single digital lever, if you will, that'll help do that?
Yeah, so to build off of what Glenn shared, we are in a crisis. The crisis is that clinicians are burning out. They're leaving the practice. We don't have enough highly qualified individuals to provide care to multiple individuals across the world, let alone even within our own cities. The healthcare systems, the hospitals are losing money, billions of dollars. The total cost of care is rising. We now have valuable tools that can help address this. With artificial intelligence, large language models, if they're applied in these areas to address clinician burnout, remove the waste from the system. We know of the nearly $4 trillion spent in healthcare, about a quarter of that is waste. That can be optimized using these tools and these technologies. We have an opportunity to be able to elevate the performance for our clinicians and our system, and there's a need to do it right now.
Yep, that's fantastic. And so, again, really, really insightful words of wisdom from David. Appreciate it. The Global Chief Medical Officer and VP of Healthcare at Microsoft. David, thank you for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
So again, just a wonderful session with David from Microsoft on this, and looking forward to, again, seeing him at the HITLAB Summit in New York City at Columbia Digital Health Week. In June 27, 28, 29, cocktail hours on the 26th, and all kinds of people going to be there that would be great for you all to join up. The next book giveaway is coming up here. So everyone, get to your keyboards, get ready for the next question. Remember, the first attendee that correctly answers in the chat box wins a free book from Sherry on advanced health technology with your own custom tailored signature and notes. So with that, drum roll, please. The next question is, what are blood cells shaped like? Donuts, triangles, croissants, or squares? I'm getting hungry just reading this list. All right. So if we could get the answers going here, and if Jerry, you want to pop in the next slide for the correct answer. And the correct answer is A. So well done. It looks like Tanya, but anyway, Jerry will validate that later. Looks like we've got a winner, and congratulations. And I'm really excited to see folks participating as we saw dozens of answers fly in here in rapid speed. And with that, very excited to introduce our next session to talk about patient trends that we're seeing in digital healthcare. and our own Mary Howard, a program director locally here in the New York metropolitan area in the digital health ecosystem in New York, who is doing a number of different programs to help spur digital health innovation in the ecosystem, is talking here now with David Lee from Carter DeLuca, one of the leading IP attorneys that we have in the country, and someone who has some tremendous insights on how to create value in digital health technology through intellectual property. And with that, we'll hand over the virtual mic to David and Mary. Thank you both for joining us today. Mary, I think you're on mute.
Great. So Stan, thank you so much for the invitation to join. David Lee, you're all in for a treat. I am very, very happy to be part of this moderation and have you all hear from David and the work that he's done in patents. And as Stan said, I run 4 accelerators in the New York area, and all of them you have to have some patent or intellectual property protection. We think that's very, very important for ongoing competitiveness. And we're going to hear why from David Lee, who has put together some really interesting information I've never seen before. And I'm really eager to share that.
Yes, thank you, Stan and Mary. It's a pleasure to be here today. So I'm going to just put on the screen some slides and have that anchor the discussion today.
I think when we started talking about this, one of the first questions we asked, because the question in software is patents, are they necessary or are patents even dead? And I think David has got some data together that really got some pretty compelling answers to these questions.
That's right. And just for some introduction, I've been in the patent field for about 20 years. And as a firm, we represent clients of all sorts, individuals, startups, large companies, universities, nationally across the world in all technology areas. But certainly from the work that we're seeing at the firm, patents are certainly not dead. But rather than just one viewpoint, we decided to take a look at some data and see how that confirms what we're seeing. Just to frame the data a little bit, what we're going to take a look at today are patent applications as opposed to patent grants. For patent applications, there are several types, but we're going to be looking at utility applications, which are the most common type and the type that you would think of when you think of a patent. It covers the functionality of a product. We're going to be looking at non-provisionals, which is also the type of patent application that most folks think about when they think of patents. So really no surprises there. We're going to be looking at patent applications filed in the US, just because that's the most readily available set of data we have. But it will cover applicants who are in the US as well as outside the US. A lot of the focus that we're going to look at today is the claims section of a patent, which is the best section to look at in terms of what a patent is going for. It defines legal coverage. So with that, we'll take a look at some trends, overall trends in digital health, as well as how they relate to startups. So first, what we took a look at was what the US Patent Office data shows for patent applications filed by year. And when I talk about patent applications, I'm just going to use that shorthand for the utility non-provisional patent application. From 1963 to 2020, the most readily set of data available from the US Patent Office, we see that there's been a period of slow growth between about 1963 and 1983. But then more moderate growth from there over the next 10 years and quite a bit of additional growth from then until now. We do see in the past 5 or so years that perhaps there's a leveling off of patent application filings, but it could be due to certain situations such as economic and COVID, for example. Now, this data that we have visibility into does end in 2020, just because there is a lag between public data for patent filings and what actually happens at the patent offices. So just to be able to anchor this from public data, we cut it off at 2020. This is data that is provided by the Patent Office itself in breaking down how these numbers look like in different technology areas. And what we see is from about 1995 or so, there's been outpaced growth in computers, communications, and electronics, and still pretty moderate growth in other technology areas. So much of the patent growth in terms of filing volume has been attributed to those computing, communications, and electrical areas. Now, how does this relate to what's happening in the economy? Two things that get mentioned quite a bit nowadays are recession and federal rates. Data we looked at for patent filings, that was historical data. How does the current market and environmental economic conditions, does that allow us to project what might happen going forward? So we took a look at US GDP over the same time period. There was steady growth in GDP during that time period. Correlating that to the number of US patent application filings, we see that there is a pretty strong correlation. Pearson coefficient of 0.98, almost as high as it goes. Taking a look at the Fed funds rate over the same time period, we also see that there's a negative correlation. Not as strong as GDP, and perhaps other factors play into this, but there is a negative correlation so that higher rates correlate with lower patent application volume, and lower rates factor into higher patent application volume. Now, looking at the year-over-year changes in patent application volume, we see that for the most part, in the 1960s and 70s, it was pretty sporadic, some years up, some years down, a lot of back and forth. Yeah. And that could be attributed to economic factors. Since about 1982, however, there's been mostly positive growth in patent application volume, with dips really attributable to certain large events of economic uncertainty or social uncertainty. So, for example, in 1982 to 83, there was a record high unemployment, persistent employment during that period from 8.3% to about 10.8%. 1996, some regulatory risk there. There was significant change to patent laws, and that spurred a pullback in patent application filings. 08 to 09, the Great Recession, and in around 2020, the COVID lockdowns. So overall, what we see is, aside from the 1960s and 70s, there's been robust growth in patent application volume, and really only significant events that reflect uncertainty are the ones that have stopped that for a year or two. Now,
David, one of the things that you're getting into is, just the persistence of patent filings and the ongoing increase of filing patents. And I think this is a really important slide that you're showing now, because, patents are expensive. But look, and this data is incredible about that you've put together here, which I've never seen before, connecting patents to exit values. I think explaining this is a really powerful story about the value of patents.
Yes, certainly. And this data is actually something put together by PitchBook. They have a lot of visibility into data relating to VCs and startup exit values. So they put together this slide here, towards the beginning of this year, about how startup exit values for startups with patents and startups without patents compare to each other. Now, this is a log scale on this graph here. So the difference between the exit values of startups with patents and without may not be very pronounced on this slide. On the x-axis here, but there was a fairly significant difference in value for startups with patents on their exit valuation. And this really shows what folks intuitively knew and suspected, but having this data is just amazing to validate that. Mary, I think you're muted again.
Thanks. David, I think this really is extraordinary. I've never heard anyone talk about this, this correlation between patents and exit values. And I wonder, given the tough climate right now, what this says about the risk tolerance for investment in a venture that's got patents versus not. And what you're seeing, and I know you've got more data, but I'd love to come back to get your anecdotal experience about that right now, because it's a tough environment.
Sure, it certainly is. Now, what this slide here shows that there is value in startups who don't have patents. The valuation is higher for startups who do have patents, but there are opportunities there as well for startups who don't. And when it comes down to, as some other presenters have mentioned, just the value and quality of the product, as well as the leadership in those teams.
Well, with ventures looking for every benefit they can get to both get funded and to continue getting funded, I think it's a really important piece of data here about that. And that's an extraordinary. Now, when you start getting into AI ML, can you say anything about how that might tie into those specific areas?
Certainly. So the HITLAB community is focused on digital health, and a number of audience members relate to work in startups. And part of the focus on today's symposium is also the startup journey. So we focused our next look at digital health patents, patent applications, and certain specific technology trends and what they look like. So this slide shows patent applications which claim something related to personal, portable, or wearable healthcare between 1970 and 2020. And what we see is there was pretty stagnant growth between 1970 and 1998, a period of greater growth in the next decade until 1999. And since then, fairly explosive growth. So one of the other presenters mentioned earlier about the role of wearables. Another one mentioned that technology and platforms relating to healthcare are really here to stay. And I think this graph really illustrates that. Between 2016 and 2020, the data does show some leveling off in that trend. And part of that could be due to economic conditions as well as COVID lockdowns. Taking a look at the portable and personal healthcare patent application filings, this breaks down a little bit into an interesting graphic that shows what technology areas and applications that group of patent applications relate to. And what we see here is there's quite a bit relating to patient information and medical records. So a lot of the companies working on in that space nowadays are doing something with patient information and record management. But there's a small slice right here on the right that relates to portable patient monitoring. And what we're seeing here in our work for clients is that is definitely a growing area of interest in technology, where the ability of patients to have monitoring in their homes, either with wearable devices or some type of sensors that are becoming more and more widespread, is something that really is penetrating the market right now and reflected by the patent data. Taking a look at how machine learning and AI has fared in patent applications in healthcare, what we see is pretty steady growth up until 2012, but then significant growth since then. I'll come back to this, and I think there is a central theme between all of these different graphs. But since 2012, pretty explosive growth in patent applications relating to AI and machine learning in healthcare. For that group of patent applications, We also see quite a bit relating to patient data and patient records, but also imaging. So imaging and machine learning, we hear about those quite a bit. And so for that group, there's imaging as well. Also taking a look at augmented reality, we see that there was pretty strong growth starting in 2016, 2015, and a little bit of a leveling off since then. These numbers are quite a bit lower than for portable and personal healthcare, as well as for AI and ML. But I think this comes back to what I mentioned in terms of, is there a unifying theme between this data for these different sectors? And I think there is. What we see is that the explosion or the upward trend in patent applications in these different sectors relate to years and timing when devices such as smartphones or cloud computing or visual reality goggles, when they become more accessible to individuals and penetrate the market in a way where folks are able to have them and innovate with them. So 2012 and 13, that was a time period when algorithms in relation to machine learning really improved, and cloud computing and other hardware relating to machine learning became more widely accessible. And at around the same time, we saw an explosion in patent application filings related to AI and ML in healthcare. 2016, that's when visual reality VR headsets became more available from companies like Oculus and HTC. And corresponding to that time period, we also saw an explosion in patent application filings relating to augmented reality in healthcare. Going back to portable and wearables, what's interesting that this graph doesn't show is that from about 2008, there was a bit of a leveling off in patent applications relating to portable and personal healthcare. So why is there a trend upwards since 2008 in this graph? And that's solely due to wearables and the role of wearables in patent application filings. So we have a period in the 80s and 90s where PCs became more widely available. In the 90s onward, where telecommunications, broadband, and cell phones became more widely available. And more recently, wearables are becoming more widely available. So these patent trends really show that there is quite a bit of opportunity still in digital healthcare due to the hardware and the technologies that are becoming more widely available to individuals.
Well, thank you. I think we've had an opportunity to see some information we've never seen, I've never seen before. Thank you for pulling this data together, both on the global trends, the relationship to raising money, the challenges related overall to interest rates rising, and then specifically the increases in AI, machine learning, and that granular look at where you're experiencing and seeing in remote patient monitoring, additional patent filings coming along.
That's great. Well, thank you both. Again, Mary, really appreciate your exquisite moderation, and David, tremendous presentation. And again, for those of you who are doubting the value of patents in healthcare, I would remind you, Columbia University's own physician, Chris Mayo, when he patented the e-prescribing process in 1996, and you can look it up, it's 3 pages. He went on to make hundreds of millions of dollars in e-prescribing because that was just an enormous patent win from him from the USPTO. So there is enormous value in patents. Sometimes, not all the time, it's tricky business. And obviously you don't want to patent everything. If you're Google, you're not patenting your algorithm, right? So, and again, definitely talk to David, look him up. You got his LinkedIn link in the chat box. And again, look up Mary as well, just the tremendous work she's doing in the New York metro area. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, David. Outstanding. And so next up, we want to remind everybody just about the tremendous programs the HITLAB team is putting together across the ecosystem to make sure that you're all connecting, you're all learning, and that you're able to see a lot of these amazing technologies in operations in a working order. So again, click on the QR code, take a look at the different educational offerings and the different connectivity offerings that the HITLAB teams are putting together, and sign up as much as you can. Obviously, if there's costs involved. Obviously, that's always tough, but if you can sign in virtually as well, we'd love to see you on Zoom. We'd love to see you in person, but definitely look that up. Again, hour number 2 for today's session. We are cooking along now and looking forward to hearing from Tasha Dazak, and she's going to talk a little bit about now faces of digital health. And welcome, Tasha. Going podcast around healthcare innovation and digital health. And again, Tasha, great to have you on the program here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
That's fantastic. And could you give us a brief introduction of yourself and a little bit of your background?
Okay, so very briefly, I've been a chronic patient for the last 20 years. I'm a journalist by background. I work as a business developer for a healthcare IT company called Better, and I've been running Faces of Digital Health for the last 6 years. And the focus of the show is really to look at how different healthcare systems around the world adopt technology. So I'm really interested in what are the cultural elements, what kind of impact does the structure of the healthcare systems have on the way that healthcare is digitized and the services that people can access through digital health innovation.
That's a fantastic background and certainly appropriate for the conversation today about HIMSS and what you saw at HIMSS and what you spoke about at HIMSS as well. Give us a little bit of a summary. What did you speak about there? What was your topic about when you spoke there last week?
So I was hosting the whole pre-conference patient experience forum and moderated a session on how are different healthcare systems around the world adopting virtual health. And then the next day, I also participated and moderated the behavioral health view from the top panel session. So basically at the patient experience forum, we highlighted some of the kind of critical points in healthcare digitalization from the patient perspective. So Aaron Miri, for example, from Baptist Health mentioned how they're developing digital services based on the needs that they detect with patients. And he said that it really pays off to just, give people what they ask you for, because that can increase efficiency. They've got 5 apps so far that help them track patients even when they're outside the hospital, and that can help them detect potential challenges with healthcare of those patients early on while they're not in the hospital. At the same time, in the virtual care session, what I thought was super interesting was that we had Mira Kang, who is the Chief Medical Information Officer of the Samsung Medical Center from South Korea. And actually in South Korea, before the pandemic, telemedicine was illegal. And as Mira Kang said, it's probably going to become illegal again because the pandemic ended. And that's due to several reasons. On the one hand, the challenges with the payments, doctors worry that online sessions wouldn't be paid as well as the in-person settings. At the same time, South Korea is not that big of a country, so the access to healthcare institutions is very good. So 2 to 4 miles is the furthest that the person needs to go to access healthcare facilities. And obviously there's political and healthcare structure systems issues that would need to be addressed to change this rule. And at the same time, what I thought was the most important session throughout the whole day was when patient advocates took the stage and highlighted the challenges, especially with AI and where patients fall through the cracks. At HIMSS, probably there wasn't a session where AI or GPT-4 or ChatGPT weren't mentioned. And here, patients mentioned things like how challenging it is because, for example, insurance companies are already using AI to make it easier to deny claims. And, when a claim for insurance and the coverage is denied, that causes huge amounts of work for patients and doctors if they want to just complain or file a complaint against that decision. So several things that I could and can talk about more if you'd like.
No, it's fantastic. And that's really impressive. By the way, congratulations on such a tremendous showing at HIMSS. From your perspective and all of your your purview of the meeting and everything that was going on. What were some of the hottest topics that you heard about, and what do you think we're going to continue to hear about more for the rest of this year?
Oh, definitely. AI, as I mentioned, and GPT-4. We see some companies such as Microsoft and Nuance already trying to embed that into the clinical practice. And there's a lot of excitement happening about how this could be used to kind of decrease the bureaucratic burden on clinicians with summarizing the patient information, patient data, maybe pulling more information closely together, structuring the data in a faster manner. But at the same time, I'm kind of happy to see that there's also a lot of hesitancy, because we really still don't quite know what the consequences could be. As we know, the specific of healthcare is that we are dealing with patient lives. So any patient harm that's caused is problematic. And to a certain degree, I guess, we know that medication or just medical errors are a huge problem in healthcare. As was mentioned also on the patient experience forum, we actually haven't had much progress in the medication error space since 1991, when, as mentioned by Echal Zimlichman from Sheba Medical Center, in 1991, kind of healthcare recognized that patient harm is a problem. Prior to that, it was just kind of accepted as a standard of practice. You will inevitably harm some patients and you will help some patients. So that's just how it goes. But just addressing the fact that maybe we should focus on where harm happens, and if we can reduce it, was an important milestone in the development of healthcare. And unfortunately, research shows that we haven't made much progress in reducing the harm. Now, when you add AI into that, and when things like denying payments for procedures, making errors in what kind of treatments people receive, that's where things really become problematic. So I hope that the topics around the ethics and use of AI will continue, especially since, as patient advocates also warned, there's a lot of errors already in medical records of patients. They often can't correct those errors. And if you base AI algorithms on just poor data, you're going to get poor results. Now, one of the things that I'm kind of wondering, though, is that with natural language processing, could AI actually help correct some of the errors in diagnosis that you have? Because, the doctor needs to decide on what the diagnosis of the patient is. But maybe AI could actually go through all the medical notes and what the patient said, and actually suggest maybe this isn't the right problem. Maybe you should actually look into something else. So that's kind of where I hope that AI would also go.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think, certainly there's a lot of discussions around that all over the world. And so that's certainly, important to hear that it was happening at the HIMSS meeting as well. And any final comments, any summarizations that you'd like to leave our audience with before we sign off?
Well, I think, with the rise of technology, it's important for us to really be informed and to kind of be mindful and to question the care we receive, especially as it's getting more and more automated. And I always like to say that as patients, we need to remember 3 questions that are often mentioned by Talia Miron-Schatz, who's a behavioral health scientist, and that is that whichever healthcare visit or medical visit you have, always remember 3 questions, but you really need to kind of repeat them before you get into the whole medical situation to remember them when you have to. And those 3 questions are, what are the risks, what are the benefits, and what are the alternatives? And, you can apply that to when the doctor proposes a treatment, when the doctor proposes a specific drug, or when the doctor proposes a specific procedure, or in the future, an algorithm. So I think we really need to just have those 3 questions in mind. So when we decide for something together with the doctor, that we are really informed about what the consequences might be.
That's really important. That's absolutely spot on. And again, great to have you on the program today. Thank you very much for joining, and looking forward to having you back again soon.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Just an incredible opportunity to learn from someone who is really at the peak of the healthcare ecosystem. So really appreciate the presentation. Thank you, Tiasha. So next up, we are very fortunate to be able to hear from Zina Manji, who's a global fellow with HITLAB and has been in digital health and has been a part of the ecosystem and has a deep understanding of regulatory perspectives and regulatory trends and how to make sure that digital health technologies are falling into compliance with different life science regulations and different reimbursement regulations. Zina, welcome to the program. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Stan. Always a pleasure.
And she'll be talking with April Smith-Harak, who's a regional health administrator with HHS. And with that, handing over the mic and the virtual microphone to both of you.
Thank you so much. So this is part of our monthly segment, Digital Health Focus, where we go a little bit deeper in a regulatory perspective or implications to regulatory perspectives. And I am so thrilled to be joined by April Smith-Harak as part of HHS and giving her point of view on ViVE. So April, please introduce yourself and what you do.
Thanks, Zina. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks all for having me. So I, as you mentioned, am the Regional Health Administrator. I work out of New York City, and I work for the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Health. And I represent our regional digital health footprint for the entire country. So even though my region is limited to New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, we really are looking at regional and other impacts of digital health for the way that we execute on policy and public health for the entire country. And I was fortunate this year to be able to attend ViVE, which was a really amazing experience.
That's great, April. I'm sure this gives you so much opportunity to look at things in so many different angles. So a lot was discussed. I think ChatGPT is all over the place, and AI certainly mentioned in this session, in this symposium as well. Important things I think that have come out so far today are, AI. It's meant to be assisted, right? I think that's where, from a clinical perspective, it's meant to assist as part of decision making. That seems to be the optimal goal here in the best use cases, augmented versus a replacement. So I wondered about your thoughts on that, April, and what you observed.
Well, certainly ChatGPT was much newer, and it's amazing to say that in the course of a month in between two conferences that something could be much newer versus, old hat in some ways. But at ViVE, being a little bit earlier, ChatGPT was much newer. People were at the very beginning stages of tinkering with it and figuring out what they might do with ChatGPT and GPT-4 technology that could impact healthcare, digital health delivery. And there was this sense of excitement about all of the capacities and all of the things that you might do. It was like a little bit like kids in the candy shop. And definitely saw in every session it was mentioned, and it's a little gleeful mention of like what might we do, and here's what we could do, and here are practical applications, but very little of a hands-on, like I've been working with it. It's more like, oh, here's a use case I'm thinking of for. So I think that's probably a key difference between ViVE and HIMSS. And I didn't get to HIMSS, so I'll be interested to hear what others say about that. And I'm seeing the South by Southwest session as well. So it was very cool. I think that there's a lot of power in AI to really build on the ways in which we interact with health and healthcare. And it's probably the key determinant of how we're going to function in health going forward, if you're looking in the digital sphere. But I think it remains to be seen. It could be a double-edged sword. So it is very much in the hands of the user. And of course, there are always equity challenges and the idea of, what do you feed your algorithms? Is it good data? Is it bad data? Is it biased data? Is it unbiased data? And what does biased data truly mean? And there was a lot of that discussion at ViVE.
Yeah, and certainly from a government and regulatory perspective, it's part of a regulated industry. We need to look at benefit, risk ratios, as well as unmet need. What are the alternatives? As Sasha mentioned earlier, it also takes place from a regulatory point of view as well when we're trying to build and look for approval packages and what data would actually support these mechanisms. But even broadly, as David Rue was talking about, just in the healthcare system overall and making it more efficient as well. And Glenn also talked about that. So a lot of threads here that are certainly coming together. And certainly more to come. So I think as we are in the healthcare industry and developers, it's important to keep these aspects in mind as we are thinking about developing forward. You also mentioned about tequity and how it's actually a lot more underpinned now. It's everywhere. It's an accepted aspect versus something as a new concept.
Yeah, I was really excited. And last year, of course, ViVE had a TechWitty stream as well. But this year they had a dedicated TechWitty stage, and that was wonderful. And there were some amazing panels and presentations and a lot of thought leadership that was happening, and it was great. And the thing that really excited me was that all of the sessions that I went to that were not on the TechWitty stage were talking about equity and bias and access and all of the things that we're really concerned about in public health. And when the government sphere and the private industry sphere kind of converge to create or acknowledge and come together on priorities that are so important to us as a society, it's really very heartening. It helps me to know that this founder who's presenting on a panel at a completely unrelated topic is also considering, what does equity mean? What does bias mean? What does it mean for access? Who's able to access these new technologies?
Yeah, exactly. And you were mentioning presence of government and really converging of government with innovation. And of course, in regulatory framework, there has to be regulatory innovation to meet the pace of technology advancement. And how do you create that framework that's going to be in the best way that can give rigor as well as reliability, but also not be too burdensome to actually enable the benefits that we're all talking about to come forward, to be able to test it, to be able to discover that value in practical and pragmatic ways. So what were your thoughts about the presence of this convergence of governments and institutions as well as with innovators at ViVE?
It was really nice to see coming from the government side. We have a reputation for being a little bit siloed, and it might be well earned. I'm not going to say whether it is or not. But it was on the Health and Human Services and even the Veterans Administration side, it was really amazing to see the level of federal presence at the conference. We definitely had a keynote from the head of our Office of the National Coordinator. We saw NIH out in force with their SBIR grantees and really highlighting the types of things that NIH is investing in. And we had CMS's innovation office meeting with founders, the one-on-one. You could register for a meeting and really just talk with a CMS person to understand reimbursement and all of the regulatory. It was very cool to see how involved we as a federal government were in supporting innovation and really trying to not just regulate, but also enable the kind of progress that we're all really excited to see. And for me, as my office is partnering with the Office of the National Coordinator, Cancer X, and seeing Cancer X highlighted and the cancer moonshot from the White House was also a very, very cool experience. So it was really nice to see a digital innovation public-private partnership highlighted at a conference like ViVE, and really be talking about what the potential impacts are for digital health to have a role in moving cancer prevention and cancer treatment forward. It's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this also speaks to what Mark talked about earlier today about the democratization at events like this, really allowing everyone to come together in an area, a physical area where, you know, collaborations or discussions are happening around you and it's easily accessible. I think also something I'm always thinking about is innovation shapes regulations. So if we are, as innovators, if we're bringing things forward, discussing early on with FDA or whatever regulatory aspect that governs the digital tool that we are looking to develop, looking at the cost basis and the outcomes of improvement, it's important to start those conversations early so that we can bring everyone along on the same page and really make sure that the studies that are being done are done to actually, you know, benefit and provide that proof and that evidence. And something Glenn talked about earlier today really struck me was we talk about risk and benefit, but it's also the risk of the status quo and not moving forward. I think that's also really important to consider, especially with the pace of advancement these days.
As government, we're not always awesome at moving forward quickly. We're specifically designed not to, because we need to be very careful to protect the interests of the public. But you know, the way that COVID has really springboarded a lot of the discussion and the regulation and progress and use of emerging health technologies is really impressive. And I'm very proud of the work we're doing, and I'm really encouraged to see more of it.
Well, thank you so much, April. Incredible insights and discussion with you today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Zena and Stan.
And thank you.
Stan.
Thank you, Zena and April. Wonderful conversation and really insightful too. Great to see all the different branches of the federal government stepping up and really helping out the digital health ecosystem. Wonderful to see. Thank you both.
Thank you.
So we are also wanting to remind you that there is this program called Breakthrough One, and it's an opportunity to connect with leaders like April and certainly other folks from HHS, cocktail hours and different salons and different breakout sessions. So scan the QR code there. If you're interested in joining, you can join for as little as $99 a year. And then there's obviously other opportunities there as well. Zena is a global fellow at the Breakthrough and HITLAB as a part of the Breakthrough opportunity. And it is a really interesting play and a nice way to get involved in the ecosystem to amplify your impact in global health and certainly your personal brand. So hoping to see you there. And we have the last hour of the program that we're running into now. And we're really excited to be able to talk with a few more folks. And we've had some additions as well. The head of Google Cloud, Ashima Gupta, is going to be here as well to join us on talking about health equity and medication and adherence technologies. But stepping up immediately is Amanda Azadian, and she is the product manager of digital health strategy for the AMA, an amazing partner with HITLAB. We love working with the AMA and all the good things they're doing in digital health. Take a look at their website to learn more about them. But Amanda was at ViVE, and we're really interested in hearing, Amanda, not only about your background and your own personal journey, but certainly about some of the key insights that you took away from ViVE, you know, particularly given your perspective, right? The AMA is the leading stakeholder when it comes to the physician's perspective in the digital health ecosystem, and they have so many great programs in digital health. Would love to hear what you saw at ViVE that really made your socks roll up and down.
Thank you so much to HITLAB, Stan, Jerry, and team for inviting me to join. It's great to be with you. I live in Brooklyn, so I'm close to New York, but I'm actually in Chicago at the AMA offices today for a quarterly team meeting. And yeah, I'm really happy to share with you insights from ViVE. as a non-physician myself, I have the pleasure to connect physicians to healthcare companies on a regular basis. And we have a platform called the Physician Innovation Network that does that. So that was the hat I was wearing when I came to ViVE, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But Stan and the team asked me to share a little bit of background just so you know kind of where I'm coming from, and then I'll get into some of the key learnings. I was pre-med, I was an athlete, I had an international focus, and then I had a mild traumatic brain injury that actually created a patient experience for me. So I kind of had this experience with the global interest and approach to medicine. And then I realized that there were a lot of things that we needed to change back home. A lot of areas where, I saw opportunity to change health globally were actually opportunities to change things right here in our own cities. And that started in Chicago, where I noticed at an FQHC through my first job in managed care, that the American healthcare system had plenty of problems to diagnose for ourselves in just terms of people getting access to basic care, and how that in my own journey would have really impacted me and my ability to heal had I not had a lot of the access that I did through my family, through my networks, through my education. And so that created a desire to go kind of understand who are the startups that are solving those problems in healthcare. And with a diagnostician hat, kind of seeing how can we identify problems, create business models, and then get clinical validation in the market to build better solutions. And so I spent 3 years at Matter Health in Chicago, which was a really great experience to really just kind of sink my teeth into the clear problems that were being addressed. And Matter had a really big presence at ViVE as well. I would say it was a smaller presence than at Health, which is a lot larger. They had 30 plus companies joining them at Health, as did many other accelerators and organizations. And we saw smaller groups, kind of smaller pavilions at ViVE, which frankly, we heard from the physicians that we brought to ViVE that was a little bit more manageable. It was easy to go to some of those pavilions and just connect with companies directly. Through my role at the AMA, we were able to comp 10 physician registrations to actually go to ViVE for the purposes of meeting with those companies and providing that clinical validation. And that was an observation that we made while I was actually working at Matter in collaboration with the AMA. The AMA has a relationship with them, and we found that when we put companies in front of investors, they weren't always quite ready because they needed more clinical validation, but they were stuck in getting that. How do they get it if, they've only been able to connect with those 5 docs that maybe were a part of their founding team, but they really needed to expand out and get a greater depth of feedback. I spent 3 years at Walgreens trying on how corporations could develop a neighborhood health destination, but I'm really happy to be here at the AMA working in digital health strategy. I've been here for about 3 years. I'm seeing chatter in the chat, so I'll definitely respond to that after I'm done speaking because I don't like to multitask, but I will share links and other resources from the AMA related to a lot of our work. Getting into some of the ViVE key takeaways, I will share a recording of our president-elect, Dr. Jesse Ehrenfeld, sharing his thoughts and experience from an AMA perspective, because again, from the physician voice, we wanted to share that with you directly as much as possible. So it was a tough Tuesday. It was a tough Monday to start the conference, as many some of my colleagues might have mentioned. I wasn't able to join earlier, but they might have mentioned that March 27th being a mass shooting very close to where the conference was being held. And ViVE and Chime had a very quick and immediate response. And then the following day, Dr. Jesse Ehrenfeld's remarks began with the statement that gun violence is a public health crisis. Thoughts and prayers will never be enough, and we need to do something about this. And he was able to share a lot about the initiatives that the AMA has been doing in health equity. So I'll share a link to the Info Health Network that you're welcome to join and check out. But he really focused on a lot of the key requirements that physicians have shared with us through our research that's been repeated every 2 years since 2016. And there's a QR code in the slides if you all share that, but I'll make sure you get it either way. And those 4 key questions are frankly pretty basic, and there are sub questions under those. But first of all, it's, does it work? Show me the evidence. Show me the patient outcomes that this solution is going to affect change in patient outcomes and create a better healthcare for those folks. Second, will physicians be liable for using these solutions? And if you say no, how? What kind of structures do they need to have in place in order to make sure that they're not liable for using this device or patient engagement tool if that data could potentially be at risk of being leaked? Does that put the physician at risk? These are the things that they want to know. The third question is, how or will I as a physician receive payment for prescribing this or for using this particular solution? And that can be kind of convoluted because sometimes the solution designer says, well, we need to figure out CPT coding. That's a great way for the AMA's CPT developer program to be involved in that. There are links to that I can provide as well, which actually provides to companies that are pre-revenue, royalty-free access to the CPT code set. So you can understand, okay, what applies to us? Can I talk to a CPT expert because I have some key questions? And you can do that right on the AMA Physician Innovation Network. The fourth question that Dr. Anfeld shared is, how will it work in my practice and what will that integration look like? So that was a deep dive of his specific talk, and I know I'm short on time, so I will also share some of the other key takeaways that we had throughout the conference. One is that the state of VC funding is pivoting to measuring value and outcomes versus that hyper growth trajectory that we were seeing. And we heard that focus on 3 key areas in the VC world, one being consumer experience. So wanting to see the value in that patient consumer experience. 2 being the ROI or the return on health specifically, and how are we measuring those outcomes. 3 being better cost and value to the purchaser, not necessarily the end user, but the purchaser. And just kind of an acknowledgement that point solutions are gone and it needs to be an integrated approach. Stan, I believe I had 10 minutes, so I'm going to pause there. I'm happy to share more throughout the chat, but be mindful of time.
No, it's fantastic and really appreciate it. Yeah, I think we have time for one more quick question, just from the perspectives that you have at the AMA and everything you're doing to bring digital health to physicians and physicians to digital health. What do you see as some of the hot topics for the rest of the year in digital health, and where do you see that focusing?
Yeah, I'm not sure how many folks have brought this up, but AI and ethics was a big conversation at ViVE. It's a massive opportunity for so many use cases, but we need guardrails. We need to make sure that HIPAA information isn't going into ChatGPT. We need to make sure that we're all kind of working together and pulling together. There were a lot of great conversations at Together.health. I heard the Techquity stage being mentioned. The In Full Health group within the Center for Health Equity at AMA was in full force. So I resonate with a lot of those ongoing conversations. Return on investment, return on patient outcomes is huge. There was representation from the Digital Medicine Society, Savvy Cooperative, #AskPatients, and we are in full support and in partnership with them. Also from the perspective of the AMA Physician Innovation Network, we think that we need to be asking more physicians for their feedback as well and making sure that we're getting a diversity of physician experiences. Health at home was another really big topic of that migration from the hospital and being able to provide for patients in their own home, keep them safe from infection and things. I heard Cancer X mentioned. I think that'll be an ongoing conversation. And gun safety was a really pertinent topic that I hope continues. It definitely got a lot of conversation during ViVE, and I expect all of these topics to continue at health.
That's incredible. And in relative to the AMA and what it's trying to do in digital health next, what and how can people do to support the AMA's mission in helping really accelerate the development and the adoption of digital health with physicians around the country?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, you know, as the AMA, number one goal within the digital medicine perspective is to reduce those hurdles and burdens that get in the way of patient care on behalf of physicians. So that's reducing administrative burden. And there are a lot of solutions that might create that, and a lot that claim to remove that administrative burden. So I think the number one key takeaway is, if you're claiming to reduce administrative burden, show exactly how and all of the components that are required in order to make that happen from an implementation standpoint. Two is, we know you can't get there on your own. It takes a lot to build a solution. You can't build it in a vacuum. You need a lot of feedback in the development of that process. And so the AMA Physician Innovation Network now has over 18,000 users. I think we're actually close to 19,000 now. And when we brought those 10 physicians to ViVE, the purpose was for their learning, absolutely. And you know, they're using their time that is typically with patients to come and continue learning, but also to share their experience with startups directly. That doesn't have to require them to travel. We have a platform that does that on a regular basis, and it is free to those, especially those of the HITLAB network, to leverage. You simply make a profile and then post your question. I will say that paid opportunities where you're saying, I want to take on a consultant for X number of hours, tend to get the most response from our physicians because they're very busy and their time is valuable. But I will be sure to drop those links into the chat so that anyone who's interested in following up. That's from the digital health perspective. We are also working on a return on health framework, which is an expansion of a lot of the digital health research that we've already done. And so we will be hosting another PIN in Real Life event at the HLTH conference. So if you plan to attend, be sure you're on PIN so that you hear about it.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Amanda. Really, really good to hear from you, and appreciate your time today. Have a great trip, and we're looking forward to seeing you back in Brooklyn soon.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. Bye.
Likewise. All right. Take care. Wonderful, wonderful interview. Just great to hear from her, and really appreciate her time today. and that really does follow on a back-to-back hour here we have to wrap up the April Symposium. And looking forward now to talking to Ashima Gupta from Google, and certainly Joanne Waters from Information Media Corporation, and the one and only Greg Butler, a senior fellow at HITLAB in Medication Adherence Technologies and Innovations. And really looking forward to this next session to talk about what medication adherence technologies are doing in clinical trials and how that's impacting the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So again, really happy to have everyone join us here today. And, you know, again, I think it's really important that as we're looking at all of the digital technologies in the ecosystem, whether it's with the folks from the AMA or whether it's with the various digital health companies that are focused on physicians, and certainly folks that are focused on clinical trials that helped accelerate an unprecedented development of several vaccines, 3 that really worked in terms of COVID, the development of digital technologies that can aid and can accelerate the clinical trial process has been enormous, and has absolutely been life-changing for people around the planet. It's not only unprecedented in terms of the development of a vaccine, but also it's unprecedented in terms of the implementation of a vaccine globally. So upwards of 3 billion people now have been vaccinated out of a world of 8 billion people. It's just, you know, other than the eradication of smallpox and certified in 1979, that 20-year effort that took the World Health Organization to eradicate a disease that killed 200,000 and scarred 2 million people every year for literally over 1,000 years. Now we're looking at the development of technologies that can help clinical trials really accelerate their role in life-saving medicines. And along those lines, let's start off the panel by having some brief introductions from our wonderful panelists. And Ashima, lead the way. Just a minute about yourself and a minute about what you do at Google.
Well, thank you, Stan. First of all, it's a really pleasure to be here. Very timely topic. Ashma Gupta, I'm the Global Director for Healthcare in Google Cloud, been in the role 7 years. In my role, I have three big responsibilities. One is our forward-thinking solutions, which are tuned to industry. The second is working with our design partner, we call them customers like the Mayo Clinic, the HCA, really thinking what those trends are, where we as a technology company build some of these assets internally. And third is industry engagement in terms of hearing from the stakeholders, policy. As an example, interoperability, I've been very, very passionate about that. So presenting our interoperability point of view, working with the CMS, with different industry bodies to push that agenda. So happy to be here and looking forward to the panel.
Happy to have you, and really very honored to have you on as well. And also honored to have Joanne Waters, a veteran now of almost 3 decades of digital health technologies and clinical trials. Joanne, thank you for joining us today. If we could also get a minute about your own journey and a minute about what you do at Information Mediary, that'd be great.
Thank you, Stan. Very nice to be here, and thank you for the opportunity. Yes, as Stan has mentioned, veteran, senior, however you wish to call that, over 30 years working in innovative technologies. And of that, the last 17, 18 years has been with IMC in digital health technologies. My primary role is to work with clients to help them understand what it is that we offer with regards to smart packaging and adherence solutions, and how does that work in clinical trials and the benefits of using such tools. So very excited to explain a little bit of that as we go on in our panel here today.
That's fantastic. Looking forward to it. And then, of course, the one and the only Greg Bauer, HITLAB's only senior fellow in medication adherence technologies. Greg, a minute about your journey and a minute about what you do at HITLAB.
Thanks, Stan. Yeah, great to be on the panel with these folks. I've been involved in digital health for about 12 years and actually wound up getting my master's in healthcare delivery from Mount Sinai about 5 years ago. I've been with the lab as a senior fellow, and then I'm also doing a lot of strategic work on behalf of startups and folks, and have been working really closely in the diffusion efforts with Joanne and the IMC team. And I concur. I think there's some really fascinating stuff going on that you all are tapping into, and we'll talk more about that. But yeah.
That's wonderful. That's great. And going back to you, Ashma, if you could, give us a little bit of background about some of the technologies that you're seeing help improve health equity, again, not just in the United States, but also around the world. Ashma, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I think there was a big
glitch.
Yes. So can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
No, of course. Absolutely. Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about where you're seeing digital technologies improve health equity around the world?
I think so. This was, by the way, the big topic at HIMSS as well. Health equity is a cornerstone of many conversations inside of HIMSS, outside of HIMSS, and how we are working with many of our systems globally. It still remains a very humbling and sobering reality. And it's a complex one, right? So there are inequities that exist on many levels, and the impact of the distribution of health outcomes and opportunities globally is uneven. And some of the stats, and I don't need to preach to the choir here, people experience their health can be very, very different. And for example, there's 1.5 to 2 times more likely to be uninsured from the Black and Latina populations. 60% or more are not likely to go to a doctor or care facility. Now, ER is a different kind of care setting. Black mothers have 3 times higher the maternal mortality rate. So with these as a backdrop, the conversation is now changing to what are the practical tools. And what we talk about at Google is information is a determinant of health. So when we talk about social determinants of health, what is the role that technology can play? And technology can be good and bad, right? So for example, a very practical example I'll give. So prior to joining Google, I was with Kaiser Permanente, right? So when we're talking about patient portals, they require a whole desktop. So when a technology like phones came in, like an Android phone, they are available to people. People are able to interact, right? So to me, that is where technology became an equalizer in terms of patient access. You don't need, like when I talk about my own mother, she's at a different age. So the patient access technology can be that equalizer. Then we talk about the technologies like generative AI, and we launched MedPalm, very proud of bringing that to limited set. But there needs to be a responsible path to that, right? Are we bringing this technology? Would they amplify the inequities that exist? And I think that there was a lot of discussion on these technologies at the HIMSS stage, main stage as well. And we need to get it right as an ecosystem. What inequities would these models learn from and amplify versus what are the guardrails that we need to put in place for equity, for bias, that they don't cause the harm to the patients, to the providers. And I think that will be the next few months to build those guardrails, and it will be important. I know there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of excitement. We are an AI first company from Google perspective, very, very excited about the possibilities ahead, but also the safety over speed is my key message. Things are moving, but we need to have this safe, bias-free kind of way, and I think that's where the industry has to come together on what those guardrails we need to create.
That's fantastic and really well said, Ashima. Thank you for that. And I think just for the audience, when we talk about health equity, what are we talking about? And just as a quick reminder, refresher, since I've been teaching this for over 30 years in technology, health equity is really this definition of helping folks attain the most that they can attain for their best in healthcare. And it really is this ability to provide healthcare in a fair way to people, not just here in the US, but around the world. And when we look at the smallpox eradication movement, that was, again, one of the most ambitious in the world, really from roughly 49 to 79. That was one of the most incredible movements in health equity. We look at certainly the polio movement and digital technologies there that helped and have been helping polio eradication. And then obviously the HIV/AIDS campaign, bringing HIV/AIDS medications to people all over the world at pennies per prescription and pennies per dose. Again, because the wealthier nations were able to make a lot of it, bring the cost productions down, and get the medications out there. And then obviously the COVID vaccine, which is just a stunning illustration, and it'll go down in history as a renaissance in medical care and life sciences. And it is something to be extremely proud of. But this is the idea that medical technology, and certainly like Ashima just talked about, whether it's helping folks in India who are living under bridges have flip phones to understand where antibiotics and vaccines can be attained for their children, or using voice messaging programs that the Gates Foundation has helped promote in Central Africa to help let moms know where not only the vaccines and the antibiotics are, but let moms know where the mosquito netting and the various clean water tools are to reduce infant mortality. So these are the steps in health equity that we're talking about. And it's also information symmetry. So it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be as simple as where is the best cancer medication out there. And that information symmetry, much like Wall Street, and we always talk about that here in New York City, information asymmetry can lead to some of the greatest disparities and in fact, illegal activities when people are dealing in asymmetrical information. We have the same thing here in healthcare technology. Asymmetrical healthcare technology and digital health is obviously an issue that we're trying to reduce. And so going back to you, Joanne, on this very important issue, Information Mediary Corporation has been working toward healthcare equity and has been trying to improve clinical trials and working with life sciences company. You're the only digital health technology and that technology has been used in clinical trials adherence that's gone through a validated study. Truly impressive work that you've done. What kind of healthcare equity elements have you seen the folks and the technologies that you've brought to the market improve, and how has that impacted health equity for what you're doing?
Well, first of all, addressing medication non-adherence and addressing, healthcare, the biggest cost to healthcare, right, is patients not taking medicine as they're supposed to, right? So as technology has evolved, platforms come about, and we can take all of this data. So to start with the basics of this, how do we know when patients take medicine? So first of all, today's standard is basically ask the patient, fill out an electronic diary, fill out a paper diary, or use electronic health records for refill rates and that sort of thing, right? All of that is a mixed form of data and feeds into systems. When you can take something like a smart pill bottle, a smart package, and what does that mean? You can actually open a pill bottle and that time is recorded, right? You can take a blister card that has intelligence built inside and push through the pill, and we know date, we know time, we know dose location, and in the hot places around the world where it's temperature sensitive, we can track that as well. These types of smart products they don't have a language. They can speak no language, but what they do is give us objective timestamps of the very critical, did the patient take the medicine? And when that feeds that level of data, that level of granularity to platforms, helps the AI algorithms increase and strengthen that. And as we were just talking about guardrails. So when you talk about guardrails, well, are you talking about guardrails you're building on a slow country road, which is, I think, where AI might be at right now, right? Or are you talking about AI that's on the Autobahn in the guardrails required for an Autobahn experience? So these are things that using objective data around how patients can take medicine is very critical. But remote monitoring and the decentralized trial designs have really come full force ahead. So it reaches better diversity among populations. And Stan, from these types of data, you can see real-time analytics from different patient populations, different areas, which brings that equity and that diversity to help patients who do need it the most. So it's pretty impressive what technology has done to date and where we're going with it.
I think just to chime in here, Stan, I think you went to your point, right? Technology is a tool that can be used for both good or bad, right?
Yes.
And when we, especially in healthcare and medicine, many talk about technology being a great equalizer, but that doesn't just happen. It's achieved with intentionally thinking about how we build things, whom we build them for, and whom we partner with, and how we market our products, right? So it's that intention and knowing and putting that kind of muscle in the design process with that intention and having a strong intention. That's what I heard at HIMSS as well, right? Technology is great, but what is the forethought and intention that has gone into knowing who are we building this product for?
Well, see, that's the thing, right? So you don't necessarily know who you're building it for until you start to see some data around that population you're building it for, right? So it's a continuous change once you get more data and see how that patient population or that area does with dosing and medication. And then that just makes everything that much better and that much more, actionable, shall we say? Yeah.
That's brilliant. And remember, I think that it's important to understand how this threads back into American democracy, right? Really, the Constitution was based upon fairness, and our democratic norms are based upon fairness. And if we look at Social Security, if we look at Medicare, if we look at Medicaid, all of these institutions are based upon fairness and equity in our own American healthcare system. And if we look around the world, these are the ideals that people reach for. These are the ideals that people are striving for. And again, looking at what we're seeing within the ecosystem, we're moving toward that way literally every decade, every century. We're moving more and more toward that kind of egalitarian society with the respect to freedoms and rights of all. So Greg, talk a little bit about this. Again, you've been a student of digital health for a long time, and certainly you've been working in business for decades and understand how these sorts of things work and how technologies are adopted by larger ecosystems. From your perspective, and certainly you've written papers on patient centricity and things like this as well. How does patient centricity, and that's a big term being used today, and especially at ViVE and HIMSS in the last 2 months, how does that thread into health equity and what we're seeing with digital technology adoption?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, I think it's a really important question. I think when I think about patient centricity, and I think HIMSS touched on it last week, we're really talking about giving care management a greater level of connectivity on the patient's terms, driving engagement levels on the patient's terms, doing the same thing with education and health education around certain conditions or indications. And all of that, if done properly, will allow the patient to experience or have a better experience. And in doing so, I believe that the issue of burden is one that needs to be addressed, because if you're in a rural population or an underserved population, and you look at what the FDA has just come out and said, trials must be more equitable and more diverse. Well, the trial management people need to think about how they're going to go about designing these trials so that people who are 30, 40 miles away from a trial site can still get the kind of experience. And so to Joanne's point earlier about remote patient monitoring and technologies, decentralized trials, all of these tools are there to reduce the patient burden so the patient can get a better experience and outcome. And I believe what that will do is improve equity improve equity overall for these different populations very much. And I think technology is crucial for it.
Absolutely. Right, it certainly is, right? And I think we've seen improvements in healthcare through technology, and I think, just for the audience, and certainly I'm sure the panel would agree, and by no means do we think equity is here today. By no means do we think it's an easy ideal to achieve. I think everyone here would agree that equity in its purest form is an ideal that it may never be achievable. But does that mean we stop trying? Never. Does that mean we stop working at it? Never. We're going to work hard. And certainly I know that the good folks at HITLAB are striving to do that every day. And that's their primary mission, is to help get there. But the idea that we ignore it and we stop talking about it, never. And so on that note, we've got about 2 minutes left here. If we could just have a summary, maybe, some 1 or 2 sentences of advice that you all would give to our audience. Again, these are folks that are aspiring to bring technology to healthcare to reduce inequities. What would you recommend, and what would you leave our audience with? And Ashima, I'll start with you as well. Go ahead.
Stan, this is an important topic, and my ask of the ecosystem is, no matter what your role is in the ecosystem, if you are a health IT provider, a vendor, a tech company, a researcher, so starting with that intention and being proactive about those architectures that we will create, the work we will do now will have an impact 3 to 5 years down the line. So baking in health equity by designing our architectures, baking in that intentionality about creating those products. I think we would love to see that being built in as a muscle from the get-go, versus very, very difficult once you build it and then go go back and fix it. So as you're designing care delivery models, remote patient monitoring, AI, so starting with that proactively is my ask, no matter what our role is.
All right, wonderful, Ashima, thank you. And Joanne.
Well, remote patient monitoring, absolutely, yes. So solutions, yeah, absolutely, Ashima, with intention of what you're doing. The architecture has to be there. The interoperability has to be there. But as per Greg's point too, it's burden, right? So when it comes to helping patients take medicine remotely or on-site or in hospital or in pharmacy, it's about the instruction burden. It's about the technology burden. So the less of all of that, you're targeting the non-adherent patient. So if you do this broad stroke approach and give everyone these tools, you're exacerbating the problem of the non-adherent. So you have to be very thoughtful. Solutions have to be interoperable, simple, and powerful, and proven results, right? And all with de-identified data to protect the patient.
That's fantastic.
See, I'll just follow on that with, at the end of the day, this is about a journey. Healthcare is about a journey. It's 1,000 journeys, but all journeys are geared toward better, improved outcomes. And I think when you look at clinical trials, if you're a trial manager, you're always looking at the next trial that you're going to be doing. You're looking at the data that you're pulling this time to make the next trial more effective as you advance your knowledge and understanding of managing the disease or the condition. So I see it as the technology is the enablement of the journey.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Greg. No, it really is a journey that we're all on together. And again, knowing that how busy the three of you are, can't thank you enough for joining us today. Really appreciate your time and looking forward to seeing you all at the Digital Health Summit in June, at the end of June this year for Digital Health Week, New York City. Talk to you later.
See you all later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
What a great panel. Seriously, I mean, when we start talking about the opportunities for folks to really engage and really understanding what's happening at the deepest levels of digital health and technology and clinical trials, couldn't have a better panel to talk about that with, again, Ashima and Joanne and Greg. And we are winding down our last half hour. Richard Schwabacher, thank you for joining us here today, Rich.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
It's great to have you. And again, we've obviously known each other for a long time, but it'd be great if you could give the audience a little bit of your personal journey as well as what you do at BioReference. And in case folks don't know BioReference and just what a major stakeholder they are in the ecosystem, a little bit about BioReference as well.
Sure, happy to do it. And thanks for having me, Stan. So I've been in diagnostics for, I think at this point, close to 15 years. Spending time at one of the major labs and past several years at BioReference, who I think, during the pandemic really scaled well beyond any sort of volume and reach and scope that it had been previously. And it was really amazing journey to be able to use digital to, facilitate not only large scale testing before over-the-counter testing was made available, but also the speed in which we were able to do it accurately was really, I think, something that we're all very proud of. I've worked also in pharma and on the provider side, and my career actually started in politics and government. I spent a lot of time in the Northeast and traveling across the country, knocking on doors on behalf of candidates and causes, all of which had, sort of a healthcare tie back to them, and it was a very formative education. It's a way that I view the world today as sort of the conversations that people are having over dinner, the things that impact them, and it's always four things, and healthcare is always one of them. So that's my journey. Certainly, BioReference is a very interesting place to be post-pandemic. I think observing the macro environment is incredible, and excited to sort of talk about some of the things that we saw down in Nashville a couple weeks ago.
And of course, everyone's talking about the tremendous session that you did in Nashville at ViVE. Patients that check themselves. The New York Times rated it a #1 bestseller, must-see TV. It got 100% on raspberries.com. If you could talk a little bit about your experience at ViVE and talk a little bit about your session there and then what you learned at ViVE as well.
Yeah, I mean, so just to take a moment and pause for a second. I mean, I think the conference was affected and impacted by a shooting that occurred. I have extended family that live in that community and who knew some of those victims. And it happened in the morning, and by the afternoon, the conference had announced that they had made a sizable donation to the families of the victims. And had also set up a GoFundMe so that all the folks on the floor could contribute. And I will tell you that had an impact, I think, on the spirit of the conference and the folks that were there, who are all there, obviously focused on healthcare and politics aside. Obviously, we're facing a public health crisis when it comes to gun violence and gun death in this country. So I think that was a really impactful moment. And I know that, hearing, I actually had dinner that night with my family, and they told me that the community was severely impacted, obviously, and that support from all the attendees at the conference went a really long way. So I just want to pause there for a moment, because I thought that was a very thoughtful gesture and something that, was very representative of our industry and made me very proud to be a part of. As far as the panel itself, I mean, I think what's really sort of interesting to all of us on that panel, if you sort of just said it in your closing remarks, the things that happened as a result of COVID, the speed at which we were able to get a vaccine produced, and the number of people that were vaccinated, and sort of the time that it took is just nothing short of remarkable. I think the other sort of interesting thing is, I mean, I'm hard pressed to think of another example of any sort of experience that the entire global community, was impacted by in our lifetimes. And certainly, world wars, which wasn't something that I was around for, but the extent to which this touched every corner of the globe in some fashion, obviously more so in some places than others, I think is really sort of profound. I think what's even equally as profound is, I dropped my kids off at school, and I could hear conversations among the other parents who were talking about the specificity of diagnostic tests and the difference between, a PCR test and, an over-the-counter test. And the acumen around testing has never been higher, particularly here in the United States. And I think when you see an industry as big as healthcare that occupies so much of GDP, there's going to be segmentation that occurs both naturally and in some cases, through, just sort of selection of, those that have the ability to engage in healthcare in different ways. And what I mean by that is we're seeing the emergence of people being able to engage in their care, trading time for and convenience for, out-of-pocket, expenditure. And testing is the same thing. And so, part of what we wanted to talk about on that panel was, what role does testing have to play now that so many people have actually participated in an at-home test, or have, paid for a test out of pocket? And what does that mean going forward? And so on the panel with me, we had folks that are working on next generation point of care testing. We have people that are working on data and logistics that are sort of aggregators of at-home tests. And then we're, also a company that was working very much on, providing those kits themselves and helping to augment what the physician is doing, as well as what we're doing at BioReference, which was a variety of things relative to meeting the patients where they are and trying to find ways to do testing at scale. So that was really the sort of overview of the panel itself.
No, it's good to see. And again, I appreciate I think we all appreciate the taking pause for a moment for the victims of the shooting. It is truly a public health crisis, and finding out and finding ways to really manage that and mitigate that is we've got to work harder as a society to get there. And from your perspective, Richard, again, BioReference is the nation's third largest lab provider. And obviously digital labs are, and remote labs and getting labs at home and at office is clearly the future of healthcare, whether it's happening this year or it's happening in 2030. That's what a lot of the audience would like to hear about and know about and understand more. What's your perspective on remote labs and remote being able to get at-home diagnostic testing? When is that going to be at an adoption rate that it'll be north of 50%, so that when people go to get their CBC done and their annual cholesterol levels checked and whatever it might be, they'll be doing it at home or at the office instead of having to take a half a day off of work to go do it?
Yeah, so this question, I think, I could take a week to answer, and I'm pretty sure we don't have that much time, but I think the short version is as follows. So one, I think one of the things that we certainly heard about was sort of the vertical integration of value-based care, and how that was sort of permeating across the ecosystem. I think obviously this week we saw further permutation of that concept. as value-based care and population health management, these approaches to patient care continue to grow and become, sort of the norm. We see more companies like Signify and others that are looking to do proper diagnosis and categorization of patients and manage either preventative or chronic condition testing. I think that's where we're really going to see the uptick in at-home testing. At-home testing, any testing that occurs outside of a controlled environment presents a multitude of problems. Obviously trying to reduce the size of the analyzer and get it closer to the patient is something that, many companies have attempted to do, one very infamously. And that's one approach. Another approach is to get the specimen smaller and then have it analyzed back at the lab. And then there's sort of the point of care devices, and some combination of those approaches is going to continue to sort of drive that adoption over time. I don't know which one is going to be more successful, right? It's all going to depend on the technology. The simpler the test, the greater the adoption we can see. And then, I think it's with the chronic illness where we will actually see the most amount of adoption. And I say that not necessarily because they're the highest frequency of users of diagnostic testing, but rather there's an ecosystem that I think supports that methodology. And, when you're trying to create a testing that's happening outside of sort of a retail environment, like a laboratory collection center or a physician's office, when you're doing it at home and there's someone there to guide the collection, or over telemedicine where there's someone to guide the collection. I mean, if you've ever done an at-home test, and I've stood up a couple, and I've obviously done product testing, they can be very, difficult and messy. And sometimes, and that's for people that I think are used to doing the testing themselves. For someone who's doing it for the first time, or may not have, English may not be their first language, or, may have other challenges, all of it creates friction. And so the short answer to your question is, the adoption will increase when we remove the friction from the process. And there's a couple different ways that can occur, but I do think it's going to happen in areas where we see folks that have chronic condition, or present a high risk of developing either complicated or chronic conditions in time, because they're the ones that the I think system is most concerned about getting to.
That's fantastic, and I really appreciate your time today, Richard, and thank you for your insights as always. Just absolutely brilliant and greatly appreciated, given your really your position in the ecosystem with the lab space and digitizing that, and being one of the evangelical folks who are really trying to promote that. Thank you very much for joining today.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
So again, Richard Schwalbacher, Senior VP and Chief Business Officer for BioReference Labs in New Jersey. Remember to link in with him. His LinkedIn page is in the chat box. And we are in our final stretch here, and we have one more book giveaway. We are very excited again. Sherry, thank you so much for these donations. But the first attendee with the correct answer for the next quiz gets a free signed book from Sherry. And the question today is, at your keyboards, everybody, how many muscles does the human body have? I'm sure Richard knows this one from his anatomy days back in Columbia. And so the answers are coming in fast and furious. It's a Richard, but it's a Richard car. All right, so what's the answer, Jerry? And the answer is, drum roll please, because I have absolutely no idea. I was more computer sciences. 650 muscles in the human body. Yeah, see, 3,000 sounded like it was a bit much. But anyway, so D is the right answer. And looking at the scoreboard here, looks like we have a lot of D's, but I'm not going to be able to go back and take a look at who won this one. But anyway, congratulations to the winner, whoever you are. And Jerry will be in touch with you shortly with your winnings, and appreciate everybody participating there. Very well done. And the last session for the day, a very exciting session by our own Sherry Duville, who is, again, the editor-in-chief of the Digital Health Series for Rutledge in this area, and the the editor of the book that those of you who won today will be receiving shortly. And then HITLAB's our own head of marketing, Rachel Fredman. So Sherry, Rachel, welcome to the symposium. Thanks for joining today.
Hi, thank you, Stan. Hi, Sherry. Nice to see you again. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here with so many luminaries. So hats off to the HITLAB team for just an incredible event so far. Big shoes to fill, but thankfully we've done this before, right, Rachel?
Yes. Exactly, and I'm excited to speak again. I guess you could first start by introducing yourself. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, and I know you're the CEO of Metagram and author of two books, one more recent, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But if you could just give a brief overview, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Sherry DeVille, CEO at Metagram, the mobile medicine company. And what I focus on is building multidisciplinary leaders and teams to transform medicine with technology. My passion is really to eradicate a leading cause of preventable death, a delay in information. We have to do the things that Peter and Mark were talking about earlier in the symposium in terms of partnering and orchestration. And what I care about and bring to this work is, number one, high quality care, done with number two, high quality technology that supports that care. And number three, passionately competent teams to deliver that technology to drive high quality care. And at Metagram, we really exist to provide our communication platform that works where nothing else does. Those who are insiders know that healthcare has a terrible connectivity, and that's just the reality. But it has to be done safely with privacy and cybersecurity built in. So this has to be also delivered through an orchestrated program to drive enterprise success. And in order to accelerate and scale our mission, we help lead international accredited industry standards and certifications. I also teach cybersecurity to board directors at Santa Clara University and the corporate board director programs for Black and female directors. I co-founded the curriculum. And this was really the result of learning how critical privacy and cybersecurity has to be the foundation of digital health. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, thank you for the overview. I guess we'll just kind of jump into your book. You launched advanced health technology at the recent ViVE conference. Tell us a little bit about that, how was launching it there, and a little bit more about the book.
Yeah, so it was a blast. So our third book, second as editor, and it was right after our panel discussion on privacy and cybersecurity, and it was held at the ViVE Cybersecurity Pavilion, together with the forward author and serial CIO, Ed Marks. He and I are both series editors for Taylor and Francis, really looking to improve the literature and the evidence that's available in the space, and which is one of the top 5 academic houses. So we loved connecting with executives. Many of them use our books in their work, and some wanted to learn more. And then we just had a lot of fun. Chime and ViVE hosted 2 events back to back, Monday and Tuesday. Monday right after our panel. And then I'm working now with industry leaders to build, including some of the ViVE panel teammates, the forthcoming cybersecurity handbook for healthcare boards. So it was just super fun. We really got into the theme of Nashville, and I have to say the rooftop bar scene in Nashville is unique and special. And so it's a
I'll
little
have to get
bit
down
about
there sometime.
Yeah.
So, and what, I guess, since you were at ViVE, what are some of the key takeaways that you saw from the conference?
Yeah, so we're deeply honored to be there. The credit of the vision of the section of the conference that I was highly involved with, which was the cybersecurity track, really flows out of the VP of Chime, David Finn, who runs that as the chair, and he also heads up the association boards for security, data, and technology, which are AHISS, AHADA, and AHIT, respectively. And they really designed and executed that book launch to fit into, because our books cover a lot of cybersecurity, which is really a mindset and a philosophy and a set of capabilities, really more than a widget or anything else, even a process. And so he did a nice job really integrating that with the pavilion as well as the panel. So that's the perspective that my insights come from. But what we really appreciated and enjoyed was just the high density of really high caliber people, decision makers, people that really move the needle in the industry, highly concentrated there. And so like HITLAB, it's really efficient, a different way, obviously being in person, incredibly dense, you know, from that decision maker ecosystem perspective. Like they had government, senior players, organizations like Health ISAC, Federal HHS 405D, top respected, eminent digital health system execs, payers, life sciences. I really was like the who's who, right? So our track, privacy and cybersecurity, ended up being some of the most important, exciting topics. It was, we believe, the most covered by trade journals for follow-on articles. And it's certainly the top policy priority of College of Healthcare Information Management executives, CHIME, and they really bring the C-suite to the event. So.
Yeah, that's great. Definitely sounds like it was a big hit at the conferences. Tell us a little bit more about what you see for the future of healthcare technology in terms of cybersecurity.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so we really see it as, and CHIME sees this too, which is why they put so much effort around the cybersecurity track, but it has to be the foundation. And, you know, it's a huge issue. And there was a recent Penniman study, and it just went through how, you know, 20% of healthcare organizations that are attacked see increased mortality. You know, 57% of them, 57 to 59%, you know, see delays and interruptions in care, and that's really unacceptable, right? And so from the CIO perspective, you've got to understand that they really don't want anything in their environment unless it has the privacy and cybersecurity built in. And that is not really a widget or even encryption. It's a whole capability. It's a whole extreme teamwork that you have to have across medicine, engineering, IT, legal, and leadership. And the books. So I'm honored to partner with our team. We've got 23 contributors, what Ed Marks calls the best of the best. And we work to embody that working group, team of teams, extreme teamwork model. And that's what I really see for everything, not just cybersecurity, but all the other hot topics of interoperability and data sharing and tech equity. And all of that requires just a radically up-leveled sort of management, general management and leadership capability to bring our industry forward. And that's what I really see.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we have to jump off?
Oh, no, I just want to say thank you so much, Rachel, Ansley, Jerry, Stan, Susan, and everyone at HITLAB for this second book event opportunity. I just am incredibly grateful for this to you and your team. And I look forward to learning more from your community and seeing how I can be helpful.
Thank you so much, Sherry.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you, Sherry and Rachel, for just a tremendous session and just great insights overall. Wonderful.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
And you too. And for our audience, that brings us to a few final announcements. Just to remind you what's going on in the ecosystem, we want to make sure that you're aware about a few things that are happening that are coming up. First of all, we have just a tremendous session with the Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. So again, go to our websites and check that out and take a look at that. We've got a wonderful session coming up with the Innovators Summit, June 27, 2029 on Zoom or in person. Again, go to the HITLAB website and check that out. Would love to see you there, or would love to see you online as well. We also are running our series on medication adherence technologies. Really important that folks are, especially in the life science industry, are beginning to understand this. We're seeing the top 10 life science companies rapidly virtualize their supply chains and clinical trials. This is obviously affecting medication adherence, and it's a really good time to understand what's happening with the life science ecosystem in this area. And then, of course, we have our Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. Would love to see you on there. We have amazing women's leaders in health tech and venture every Wednesday afternoon from 12:30 to 1 o'clock. An incredible opportunity to get to know what's happening. Coming up is our own Health First representative. Nicole would love to see, Nicolette would love to see you there to see what she has to say and how things are going at Health First. So again, on behalf of everybody at HITLAB, thank you for joining, and special thanks to our sponsors, Estelas, Carta de Luca, H-Tech Collaborative with AARP, Colgate-Palmolive, IMC, FFF, and Goodwin, and of course the Merck Global Fund. Thank you to you all. And then our amazing production team. It takes hundreds of hours to put these on. Rachel, Yamina, Ainsley, Raymond, Vienna, Brian, Melissa, and Jerry. Thank you all for doing a tremendous job this month, once again, for bringing all these amazing people together. And on that note, everyone have a great rest of April. We'll see you at the end of May for the next Digital Health Symposium. Stay healthy.